Welcome to DAX Machina, with your hosts, Naomi Finn, Steve Wildman Munrotis, and D.A. Roberts. Join us as we explore writing, books, authors, and all things horror. We will delve into the sightings, reports, encounters, and tales of monsters. We will also explore the writings of D.A. Roberts along with others in the horror genre. We will investigate the possibilities that monsters may not be safely locked away in the pages of books. They might just walk among us even now. Grab some popcorn and lock the doors. It's going to be a creepy journey. Welcome to DAX Machina.
Good evening, folks, and welcome to DAX Machina. With me are my usual partners in crime, Naomi Finn and Steve Wildman Munrotis. Steve's actually getting to join us on a Wednesday night for once. Usually he just shows up on a Saturday night, so we're happy to have Steve tonight because he's on vacation, and we have a very special guest in the house tonight. You might recognize him from the show The Alaskan Triangle, and he's done a couple other documentaries. Most notably, the one that I was interested in is he has actually been boots on the ground in Port Chatham, Alaska. Joining us from Alaska is Larry Beans Baxter. Larry, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah, we're thrilled to have you, man.
And
don't everybody talk at once.
I was just reading the chat. I was like, hey, I'm getting hellos and stuff.
Yeah, people are surprised to see you on a Wednesday night.
Yeah,
I'm surprised to be seen. I got my first vacation of this whole little new world we have right now, and my wife exiled me to a cottage at the lake for a week. And
nothing wrong with that.
Much to my surprise, they've got good Wi-Fi, so
That's even bigger shock.
and the important thing is you're still in an upright position.
Absolutely.
I'm in an upright position. Good vacation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to try that taco place you found.
Oh my God, yeah. We like to plug, small businesses. I'm staying at a little resort town called Indian Point on Table Rock Lake. You can see a map of the lake behind me there. And in Indian Point, it's a food truck at this little resort there, and it's called the Shady Taco. And
I think I dated her.
Well, my buddy and I went there just mainly because we have the sense of humor of the typical 14-year-old boy. And so, I want to get a Shady Taco. And so we go up there, and they had the best street tacos I've ever had. They are absolutely phenomenal. We went there last night, and I had an asada, which I understand is like a steak taco. And then today we went back for lunch, and we had pastor, which is it's like a spit-fired pork. And oh my God, it was absolutely phenomenal. So.
Cool.
We've definitely got to make the trip down there. One of these nights, maybe me, you, and the girls will head down there and grab some.
Oh, they're worth the drive, man.
Well, we'll have to do that. Mr. Baxter, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear some of your background. You let our audience know some of your history and let them know what all you've done and your experience with the Bigfoot world.
Yeah, sure. By the way, hi, werewolf. You can call me Beans. That's fine. I was born on a dark and stormy night. No, I won't go back.
Those are the best stories.
I was born and raised in Kentucky and grew up hunting and fishing there. I joined the military when I reached the age of reason, and I said, I don't care where the Army sends me as long as it's nowhere cold, and straight to Alaska I went. And I ended up really enjoying it. I met my wife up here, and just I liked it so much I stayed. So when I got out of the military, I came back here and have been here pretty much ever since. I got into law enforcement in 2006, and I worked on a little place called St. Paul Island. If you've ever watched The Deadliest Catch, that's where they'll go and they'll offload the crabs sometimes. And I worked there for about 3 years. Got my certification, went to the academy, all that good stuff. And then got hired at Homer PD, which is on the Kenai Peninsula, and spent the last 12 years there. And then just recently retired from that, and trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
I think we're all still trying to figure that. I
I
told
want
my
to be
wife that
4.
I told my wife if I didn't grow up by the age of 50, I didn't have to. And I'm 51 now, so I'm not doing it. I refuse.
You waited her out.
Yeah.
But yeah, while I was at Homer, I got promoted to investigation sergeant, which meant I either supervised or conducted all the felony investigations, like sexual assault, murder, anything like that that happened. So I got a lot of good training. That's one thing that the Homer Police Department does well, is they send their guys out and get them some good training. So I try and, I've always been interested in Bigfoot. It's always been something that, it's just been a passionate subject of mine. And just here a few years ago, my wife and I had a little something happen while we were out in the woods, and it kind of lit a fire under me. And I thought, I'm going to bring some of these like skills and some of this training from law enforcement. I'm going to bring it over into Bigfoot and see, just see what I can find out. And that's where I'm at today.
Well, that's awesome. What happened with you and your wife in the woods that kind of set it off?
So we had gone on a hike and I was in this area, hiking in this area, particularly because I knew there had been Bigfoot sightings there. It's in the Kenai National Wildlife Refuge, about an hour and a half away from me. But we were just hiking. I didn't expect anything to happen, but if it did, I thought it would be cool. And we were walking through this, it was a pretty marshy area, and I had ended up falling in some water, like I'd stepped in a marshy area and just sunk right up to my thigh. And it was about this time of year. It was October in Alaska, so it was a little chilly. And we had planned on being out like a couple hours, like we were gonna hike for a couple hours and come back. And we were out there for like a half hour, and I'm like, well, we got to go back because I'm gonna get hypothermia if we don't. And we were walking back to the truck, and we were following this trail. I was in front, my wife was behind me. She had a walking stick, and we're almost to the truck. I can almost see it. And I've got like tunnel vision, I'm like, I want to get to the truck. I want to get these wet socks off. I want to get, dry. I'm miserable. Things are starting to chafe. I want to get comfortable. And so I'm just walking with my head down toward the truck, following the trail. And I hear this behind me. I hear thoom, 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 like 3 really big, like the ground vibrated. Mm-hmm. And I kind of thought, at first I thought, well, it's my wife. She's hitting the ground with that stick. And she stops and she's like, did you hear that? And I was like, yeah, wasn't that you? And she's like, no, that wasn't me. It was coming from behind us. So at this point, I'm just like, I forget all about being wet. I'm like, I want to know what that is. So I start walking in that direction. Of course, she's like, no, stop. And I'm like, oh, it's probably a moose or a bear or something. And so I walk up.
He gets mauled.
Yeah. And I'm not Grizzly Adams. I can't talk to the animals, but in my experience, which is, it's not nothing, most of the time, bears will run away from you. Most of the time.
Except for if you're a new Coast Guard person. Yeah. Just, they're like, oh, he's new here. We're not going to run from him.
Or the guy that called himself the Bear Man.
Yeah.
Didn't run from that guy.
I walked toward it, and I couldn't find any bear sign, bear tracks, moose sign, and we couldn't figure out what it was. And I did end up finding a impression in that area. The ground was really kind of soft and spongy, and I found a pretty large, I think it was about 16-inch impression just off by itself, and it just looked like a foot with a big toe. And it wasn't at that particular time, but it was another time that I went back there that I found that impression. So I think that maybe that might have been a Bigfoot, just because I know there's been a history of sightings in that area, and just for how weird it was. Just the 3 big hollow thumps. We didn't hear anything run off into the distance. We didn't hear any brush cracking, nothing like that. And then it just stopped, and then we couldn't find anything. But I want to, where am I from in Kentucky? I am from Western Kentucky in a little place called Muhlenberg County. If you guys are familiar with John Prine, the song Paradise, that's the place he was singing about in that song.
RJ wants to know. He's a usual member of the crowd, but for some reason it never accepts his name. So I always recognize it by his picture, because it says default name in that picture. I know it's RJ. He says, Larry, any calls or PD investigations that were Bigfoot related when you were on the job?
So I tell this one every time. Somebody always asks this, and I always tell the same story. One night we did get a call. Now, I was a police officer in Homer, the city limits. So we handle basically everything within the city limits. Homer is actually, for Alaska, it's actually kind of a bigger city. It's about 6,000 people. And I mean, we have a hospital and a McDonald's. I mean, we're big time. Okay. And so there's a couple of campgrounds that are in town, and there's one that's up by the hospital that backs up. I mean, it's just probably, I don't know, a couple of miles of woods behind it. Just nothing behind this campgrounds, but woods. And we got a call one night. It was kind of a nasty, rainy night. This guy calls. He goes, Bigfoot just ran into my campsite and stole my potatoes. So the dispatcher, God bless him, the dispatcher, he was a new dispatcher. He had just got cut and loose. It might have been his first shift all by himself, or one of his first shifts by himself. And he actually saved the recording from the tape from this guy calling in. And the guy calls in and he's like, Bigfoot just came into my camp and took my potatoes. And you can hear the dispatcher goes, Sir, did you see the beast?
See the beast. It's amazing.
So he wasn't going to send us.
He was covered in beans.
He wasn't going to, the dispatcher wasn't going to tell us about it because he thought it's a crank call. It's, it's garbage.
Right.
And the guy calls back and he's like, I've got my rifle, and if it comes back, I'm going to shoot it. And well, now, I mean, this guy's in a campsite. He's not off by himself. He's in town where there's other campers around. And now the dispatcher's like, okay, we can't have that. So he tells us about it. It's like, hey, this guy, and it's a guy we dealt with quite a bit. He says he's in his campsite. Bigfoot stole his potatoes, and he's going to shoot Bigfoot if he comes back into the campsite. So I'm like, okay. So me and my partner, we go up there, and I mean, it's a crappy night. It's dark, it's raining, and we talk to the guy, and he's obviously under the influence of probably multiple substances. And he says, yeah, the Bigfoot, he came over there and he took my potatoes off the table and ran off with them. So just, I mean, pretty much more than placating than anything. I walked over there and I looked around. I didn't see any footprints or anything like that. My partner's looking at me like I'm freaking crazy. He's a scofftic. I mean, Bigfoot could hit him upside the head and he'd still say they weren't real. And so I'm like, I don't think so. And he's still going on about Bigfoot and how he's seen him everywhere he's ever went and all that. So we ended up taking his gun away from him and taking him to the hospital. And I think they held him till he was sober, let him go. But that's the only Bigfoot related police call I ever had. And I don't think there was anything to it.
Well, the holding them until they come out of it, in the nursing world, we call that metabolizing the freedom. And I've seen that many a time.
My brother is
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Here it's called a Title 47 because you're basically, that's the law that you're holding them under, is called Title 47, and you're just holding them. If they can't take care of themselves and there's nobody else to take care of them, the hospital or the jail will hold them until they're better.
Mm-hmm. Probably
my brother
the guy
was a
just
cop
wanted you to bring potatoes.
Just replace the potatoes. My brother was a cop for years before he retired. His most recent department was in Walla Walla, Washington. And him and I were swapping stories one day. And he said there wasn't a week went by up there they didn't get at least one Bigfoot call. He said 9 times out of 10 it was just something dumb. But every once in a while they'd go out there and like, well, we don't know what the hell did this.
Yeah, and I'm surprised I didn't, because we only responded to calls in the city limits, but I could listen to the radio traffic that the troopers had. And, they would cover basically everything that we didn't on the peninsula. And we could listen to all of their, from the tip of the peninsula to the southern tip. And I don't remember ever hearing any kind of Bigfoot related calls coming through on them. I did hear some search and rescue missing person stuff, but I never heard any there's a Bigfoot over here, or somebody saw a Bigfoot. And I think most of the time, as long as there wasn't like an immediate threat to life or property, I don't imagine those kind of calls will go over the radio anyway. They would probably just log it and, okay, so-and-so says they saw a Bigfoot over here. That's,
yeah.
What are we going to do?
They don't have a code for something like that to keep it off the radio, like how you'd say J4 instead of a dead body.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I'm not a big proponent of the government conspiracy to keep Bigfoot secret. Because when I retired, I was the investigation sergeant. I was like third in command of the. If the chief was out and the lieutenant was out, then I was basically the chief. And nobody ever pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, if anybody ever comes in with a Bigfoot body, or if anybody ever says, Bigfoot did this is what you tell them. They saw a bear." So I never got anything like that. So I just
no briefing about it.
Yeah, I just don't think it's a thing.
I would assume that hell, I've been one of the municipalities where I was literally the only officer on duty. I've never had anything like any briefing like that. But then again, little municipalities, they probably wouldn't even bother.
I don't know. I would think little municipalities would be the ones that would be most likely to encounter it.
Well, they know first thing we're going to do is call the big boys. Call for somebody with more weapons than us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had to go on a couple of fish and wildlife calls for the wildlife troopers because they were busy or whatever, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I'm like, I don't know what the laws are. I got a call one day.
Not fish police.
Yeah, and they call, and there's this area. There's what's called the Homer Spit, and it's just this piece of land that just juts about 4 miles out into the water, and that's where the harbor is and all that stuff. And people fish off of the end of it sometimes. And we get this call from the troopers, and they're like, "Hey, there's no wildlife troopers on. Can you have one of your guys go out here and check this guy out? We've got multiple complaints on him. They're catching fish at the end of the spit, putting them in coolers, and they've got like 3 or 4 coolers full of fish in their van. And people, think that they shouldn't be catching that many fish." So I drive out there. They give it to me. I drive out there. I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know I know you can have
the limit on the way out.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know what kind of fish they've got. I'm not even there yet. So I get out there and I'm talking to this poor gentleman. He doesn't even speak. He barely speaks English. And I'm like, "Can I see your license?" And he gives me his driver's license. I was like, "No, can I see your fishing license?" And I'm like looking at it and I'm like, "Well, I guess it's good. I don't know." And then I'm like, you know how when you talk to somebody that doesn't speak English, you automatically, because to make them understand you, you start talking louder. So I'm sitting on the side. I'm standing in front of this poor guy, in front of all these people, and I'm screaming at this guy like, "Are you fishing over the limit?" And he looks at me, he goes, "Cod?" And I'm like, "Dispatch, what's the limit on cod?" And they don't know either, so they got a call. So they call the wildlife troopers, and they're like, "No, there's no limit on cod. They can catch as many as they want." And I was like, "Have a good day, sir." Gave him his license back and walked on. But what it was the tourists were out there and they were watching this guy just catch cooler after cooler of cod, and they were like, "That can't be right," because they hear like, "Oh, you can only catch so many salmon or whatever." Mm-hmm. They don't know what fish are, what fish are which, and they called the police on it.
I love it.
That's hilarious.
Well, I couldn't identify any of that stuff. Of course, I've never been to Alaska, but I like fish.
Well, I've been up here for a while, and even now I'll pull a salmon out and I'm like, "Okay, now is this a silver or?" And I'm like getting my phone out and looking, and sometimes I still can't tell the difference. And my wife will be like, "Oh no, you can tell. It's got the little black spots behind the eyes." And I'm like, "Sure, okay."
Here, honey, identify this. You're here to keep me legal.
Yeah.
I'll pay you folks. You tell me what it is.
Well, for those of you who may or may not have seen the episode of the Alaskan Triangle, Beans here was on the expedition that went into Port Chatham, which is something I've been dying to ask him about. We've talked about Port Chatham here on the show, and Port Chatham is one of those big mysteries that's just kind of lingered, and I've been fascinated by it for years. And I'm really dying to ask him some questions about Port Chatham. So with that in mind, folks, if you got any questions, pop them up there. But I'm going to be asking a few myself. So what was it like when you first hit the ground in Port Chatham, knowing the legend?
Well, let me tell a little bit of the backstory about how we got out there in the first place. I had heard about it, and it's only from where I'm sitting here talking to you right now. Port Chatham is only like 40 miles that way. Like,
Wow.
it's not far at all.
It's like for us to driving to Joe Bald, Steve.
Yeah, it's not far at all. But the problem is that it's what's called around the corner.
Mhm.
So you leave the Homer Harbor and you start kind of heading south, and then you've got to go basically you've got to exit Kachemak Bay and kind of go around the corner into the real ocean. And it's a little rougher out there, and you got to have a certain size boat basically to make it out there. I mean, you can try and go in a smaller boat, and you might go might make it depending on the seas, but they generally don't recommend you try it with anything less than a 30-footer. So I was approached by Stephen Major, and he says, "Hey, I'm going to go in here. I'm going to make this documentary, and I would appreciate it if you would come with me." And I said, "Oh yeah, absolutely. I'd love to go. Can't wait to go." And the problem with just, like, even though I live here, the problem with getting there is you got to rent a boat to get there. And, it's usually like $2,000 for a trip, basically.
Wow.
And that's a lot of money to pay to just go 40 miles.
Would it be possible to get there overland?
Yeah, but not, I mean, you would need probably like pack mules and horses and.
Oh, so it'd be a full-blown expedition to get there overland.
Yeah. I mean, you could probably, you might be able to fly into like Nanwalek.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the native villages that's not too far from there. You might be able to walk in that way, but you wouldn't be able to take much with you. I mean, literally just like, a couple of packs,
be bushwhacking the whole time.
Pretty much. There used to be like a logging road that connected the two. And from what I understand, it's grown up and it's impassable. You can't drive a 4-wheeler on it anymore. It's so bad. So Steven says he's going to go in there, film the documentary. He asked me to go with him, and I accepted. And then he rents this boat. It was this huge boat called the Puckuk. It was just, oh man, it was nice. If you've seen the documentary, In Search of the Port Chatham Hairy Man. And so we get there, we pull in the middle of the night. It's like 1:00 in the morning, and we wake up the next day, and it's just, there's just like fog setting over the entire area, like over the mountains, and you can just see the shore's kind of gray and it's full of rocks and just this wall of trees. And we're like, all right, well, let's go in there. And it was me, Steven, Mary Beth, Reed, and our camera guy, Josiah. So there's 5 of us going ashore. We get on this Zodiac, go up there. And I just remember like thinking, I mean, I knew obviously we're not the first people to ever go in there, since like 1950 or whenever the town was abandoned. But I knew like we were the first people going in there to basically film and do this documentary. And to actually look for Bigfoot. People will go on little day trips and stuff in there. And some of the natives will hunt back in there. That's actually native owned land. But we were the first people to go in there and film. And I remember as they pulled the Zodiac up on the beach, and I think Josiah was probably the first one off, but then I was the second one off. And I remember just starting to walk towards the tree line, and it's just this big impenetrable wall of trees, and just being like, oh my God, we're going to get so lost. And just walking, just like I forgot to take my life jacket off, and just walking toward that wall of trees, and it was just so intimidating, thinking, oh my God, we're going to go in there. And it was kind of for a big bad policeman, it was kind of humbling, like, man, I'm going to go in there and I'm not going to come out. But yeah, that was kind of my first impression of the place. Was just it's massive.
Wow.
It's a beautiful country up there.
Yeah. And
I'd hate to try to get through that.
Yeah, that's my favorite picture, that one right there. That's kind of an example of some of the crap we were walking through. And it's impossible to be quiet when you're walking through that. You're not making a lot of noise, but you're stumbling around. It's the ground soft. You're stepping on sticks. You're stepping in puddles and, making splashing sounds. And it's really primordial terrain.
It's pretty country, but like you said, it looks like it'd be very, very easy to get lost in if you didn't know what you were doing.
Yeah, we pretty much
Something's dinging. I keep hearing a dinging.
Yeah, I've got mine on airplane mode, so it's not me.
Huh. Well, I've been known it to be a dingy witch before.
It may be on my end.
Okay.
There's my
That's that
Marine
shotgun
Magnum.
you were talking about.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's one of the only pictures I've found of the town back in the day.
It's a cool looking picture. I mean, you know, there were obviously people lived there. It's a really cool story about how the place was abandoned. And you know, what was your take on it? You know, do you think that the legends are true that basically Bigfoot ran everybody out of there?
Well, yes and no. I don't think Bigfoot was a reason for the town dying. I think it died because of economic reasons. I actually, I talk about that in my book that I wrote about the place. I actually go quite a bit into the history. I think it was actually more of an economic reason that the town died, but there's definitely legends of Bigfoot being there. I mean, you know, I've talked to people that live there. I talked to people that grew up there. And if they didn't see something, then somebody they know, you know, a relative or somebody saw something. So, I mean, the stories are true. And people went missing there. I mean, that's not up for debate. I mean, it happened. There's not a lot of good record keeping as far as the missing people go. Yeah. But they definitely happen. And that's one of the most frustrating parts about it, because every time somebody asks me, like, well, so how many people died or how many people were killed? Can't tell you. No clue. I'm pretty sure Andrew Camlock is one that died under mysterious circumstances. And then there was a miner that went missing. But as far as the mutilated hunters, all that stuff, I can't really speak to that because there's just no documentation. And a lot of that, you have to realize that a lot of this stuff occurred before Alaska was a state. So there wasn't a lot of record keeping or
much law enforcement of any kind.
Yeah, it was actually, I think, the Alaska Territorial Police that was the law enforcement around then. And even then, you didn't have, like, there wasn't a cop station in every town. There might have been one for the northern half of the peninsula and one for the southern half of the peninsula, and they spent most of their time in the populated areas. And maybe if they needed to, if something happened, they might go, you know, catch a boat and head out to the village and be there in a day or two. And it's actually not a ton has changed. The troopers can get to places a little faster, but it's still a lot like that. You know, you have your the VPSOs, the village public safety officers, and most of them aren't armed. You know, they might have a taser or something. And if something major happens, basically they batten down the hatches and call the troopers. And depending on weather and, you know, stuff like that, the troopers might not be able to get out there for a couple of days. So. Yeah,
I shared the link to get your book on Amazon in the chat.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
But yeah, it's frustrating researching that place because, like I said, the record keeping back then was so poor. And then you got to look into, like, well, it's also, you know, it was a village in Alaska. Things are always catching on fire. There's always buildings that are collapsing because of snow load. You know, you'll have roofs collapse when they get, you know, heavy with snow, and not a lot of records, you know, survive that long. Not from back then. And I was determined when I decided I'm going to write the book, I'm going to, like, document this history. I was bound and determined to find Andrew Camlock's death certificate. I was like, that will be like the golden ticket for me. That'll be like, that'll either say, okay, yeah, he died by blunt force trauma to the head, or it'll be some mundane reason, like, you know, he died of a heart attack or something. So I basically just went into it thinking, like, I'm going to find his death certificate, and it's either going to collaborate or disprove the story. And the story of Andrew Camlock is he was running a logging operation, and he was found out in the middle of nowhere dead. And they said that he had been struck in the head by a large piece of machinery that was too heavy for a man to lift. And the family blamed the Bigfoot, or what they call the Nantinaq. And so I thought, well, I'll find his death certificate. That'll be it. So I look and look. I can't find it. I'm looking online. I'm looking in local archives. Can't find it. So I think, well, I'll call the state archives in Juneau, and they have people, because it's in Juneau. It's not like I can just get my car and drive there. So it's, you know, several hundred miles on the arm of Southeast Alaska. So I call, and this nice lady, I can't remember her name, but she's like, "Oh yeah, I'll help you." And I tell her what I'm doing. I'm like, "I'm writing this book and I'm trying to find this guy's death certificate. Supposedly he was killed by Bigfoot." And immediately she's like, "Oh really?" She gets really interested in it. So she's like, "I'm going to help you." She's like, "We're going to find this." So a couple of days go by. I give her all the information I've got. She calls me and she says, "I can't find it." She said, "I have looked everywhere." And this is pretty funny. She goes, "You know what you might do is try the Homer Police Department." And I said, "Ma'am, I guarantee you they don't have it. I can promise you." So she had no idea that I worked there. So, "Hey, Neoma."
You made it back, Neoma. Tale of two Neomas.
Tale of two Neomas. Yeah,
Such a weird name. We don't need two of us.
Right after bragging about how good the internet was there, we lose you.
Well, what's funny is I lost everything. I was running my laptop off a battery, and all of a sudden there was like a lightning flash. It went black, and then I had to completely reboot. And I was like, "Well, that's bizarre." So I don't know if the battery just got that low. It got twitchy or what happened. But
so you're saying the guy in Alaska in America's Last Frontier gets better internet than you?
My internet has to be brought in by dog sled.
That's funny.
It doesn't help that I'm sitting here in a 100-year-old cottage, so the wiring is touchy at best, and we're having a hell of a storm down here.
Yeah, so she had no luck finding his death certificate, but she did find one thing. She found his son's death certificate. So Andrew had a son that died when he was about 14 years old, and he died in Port Graham, or Seldovia. I don't remember which. There are two villages that are pretty close to each other, and he died in the village of drowning. And under his mother and father's information, his father's name was Andrew Camlock, and his father says he was born in Portlock. So that basically all I can do is verify that Andrew Camlock existed. I can't verify that he died under mysterious circumstances, but it's pretty much well known that he did among his family members.
Well, word of mouth is better than nothing because they were there at the time.
Yeah, and people, the natives, a lot of time that's just how they passed on their history. They didn't write things down. They didn't have books. They told stories. That's how they conveyed their history.
Well, if there's a place where something like Bigfoot or any other number of large animals could still exist, it would be in the wilds of Alaska. What do they say? There's more than 16,000 people have gone missing in the Alaskan Triangle in the last 30 years. Yeah,
I think that number's probably a little confabulated. I think there's probably that many people that have been reported missing, but that doesn't count the people they found or the people that came home. I mean, when I was working as a police officer, we would get missing person cases where somebody would call and be like, it has a lot to do with statistics and coding. So like if I called dispatch right now and I said, "Hey, my wife's missing. I can't find her. She's gone." Well, they're going to say, "Well, how long has she been gone?" "Well, I don't, she was supposed to come. She went to visit her parents. She's supposed to come back this morning. Now it's, 6 p.m. or whatever. And she's not back." Well, they're going to cut an incident, they're going to log it under a missing person. But then my wife shows up like 30 minutes later and she's like, "Hey, I'm sorry. I ended up, running into my cousin and we ended up talking for, like 3 or 4 hours. And then we went out and got something to eat." And I'm going to call the police department and go, "Hey, don't worry about it. She's back." And they're going to say, "Okay, well, that was unfounded." Well, they're still going to have a missing person stat.
Yeah.
It's still going to be listed as a missing person's case. It's just not going to be active. And so when people do these Freedom of Information Act requests and stuff like that, they just want the raw numbers. Like, "Well, how many people were reported missing?" They'll be like, "Oh my God, it was like 16,000. They're like, 16,000. That's crazy. Well, 10,000 of them was just guys that were late getting back from the grocery store. So,
I have a cousin that lived up there and his adult son went missing and stayed missing for 2 weeks, but they did find him. So he may be considered one of those 16,000 people.
Yeah, it's very possible. And it's a lot of times the way politicians and people, they skew the statistics is stuff like that. They'll say like, oh, like crime went down. Well, crime didn't really went down. They just made things that used to be illegal not illegal anymore, so they're not counting that and stuff like that. They decriminalize drugs, stuff like that. So anytime somebody talks about like crime statistics or stuff like that, I always got to wonder in the back of my mind, like, well, are they talking about like raw data, or are they talking about like this is the way it looks on paper? Yeah.
Right. Well, and I would think
about what year I'm sorry, Steve. Go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say, I would think Alaska has a certain percentage of people that go there to go missing.
That happens quite a bit.
Disappear.
And everybody's different. Everybody has different family dynamics. But I mean, we would get calls for people like, hey, I'm looking for my son. He's missing. He's supposed to be up there and he's missing. And we're like, okay, well, when's the last time you heard from him? Oh, 2 years ago. Okay, well, where was he living when you last heard from him? Well, I don't know. Well, why are you calling the Homer Police Department? Well, I've called everywhere else. So,
and that's another thing. Mr. Chef Yoda wants to know, what year did Andrew die?
I believe it was 1930. Hold on, I'll tell you. I used to know, have it memorized. 1931.
1931.
Yeah.
Way before Alaska was a state.
Yeah. Well, and you got to keep in mind too, all these legends of the Nantinaq, this large bipedal hairy creature, all this predates the Patterson-Gimlin film, Bigfoot, any of that crap down in California, the lower 48. I don't mean to call it crap like it's crap, but I mean just all that stuff down there. It predates all of that. So a lot of people, you'll see a lot of articles like, oh, this guy, was it the guy that faked all the prints down there? I can't remember.
Oh, Bob Hieronymus.
Yeah, those guys. They're like, oh, this guy, invented Bigfoot. He created a monster. And it's like, well, what about the monsters that were running around up here in 1930? They were talking about them then.
Well, the Lakota called it Chietonka, and it's just an accepted part of their world dynamic.
Yeah, and I have an opinion on that. I think because a lot of people think, oh, the Native Americans, they know what Bigfoot is. They know, and I disagree with that. And I'm trying to be I don't want to be disrespectful to any Native American. I have a lot of Native American friends up here, but I think the more accurate statement is they have more awareness. Because if you look at their legends, they have just as many theories about what they are as we do. This tribe says it's another tribe of people. This tribe says they're spirits. This tribe says they're cannibals. This tribe says, they're guardian spirits. And so they've got all these different ideas of what they are. So I don't necessarily think that they know any more than we do, because we have just as many theories. And when I say we, I mean the white man. But I just think they have more awareness. It's more part of their culture than it is for us.
I think that when it comes to dealing with, and this is just my opinion, I'm no expert on anything. I don't make any claims of being an expert on any subject, but my opinion is I think that there's a good chance that the Native American lore, they may be all right, because in different parts of the country, we see different reports coming in of different behaviors. Like if you get down in the southern states, or hell, just not too far from here, down in Oklahoma, there are lots of accounts of just straight up attacks. So the ones around here in this neck of the woods are a lot more violent than, say, the ones that are high as a kite in Northern California.
I think the ones in the South are so mad because it's so hot and humid down there.
They got all that hair.
You'd be pissed off too if you had all that hair and it was that hot.
Yeah.
You could have your hair be frizzy all the time. Wouldn't be nothing you could do with it.
I wonder they look like crap down here.
When I was, and that's why they stink too. When I was driving down here, I passed a tour bus for the Branson Bigfoot expedition, and I was actually kind of excited. I was like, "Oh, this would be really cool! I got to tell DA about this." And I was like, "It's a theme park."
It's a Branson tourist trap.
In Branson, Missouri, where they put a Bigfoot theme park, and I was disappointed.
Yeah. And I think, and you bring up a good point, DA, about how they're, different ones separated by geography, because something you don't hear a lot about up here in Alaska is tree knocks.
Mm-hmm.
The thing you hear more about up here, especially from the natives, is whistling.
Mm-hmm.
They say if you're out in the woods and you hear whistling, turn around and go the other way. It's the hairy man.
Well, there's a lot of lore in our areas, and Naomi can verify this. They tell you, the natives will tell you, if you're in the woods at night, don't whistle.
Yeah, I was told my whole life, never whistle in the woods ever, but especially not at night.
Yeah. Well, I was out in that. Go ahead.
No, so I was going to say in some parts, like here, like in the northern areas of the Midwest, like if you look up in the Upper Peninsula, like Wisconsin, Michigan, you'll hear more about the tree knocks. But you get down in the big thicket area of Texas, I hear more about rocks clacking together.
Yeah. Well, I was in my buddy's cabin near Seward, the place that we call Area A, and he's had a lot of activity there. And I was sitting up on the hill behind the cabin, and they were kind of running around. They were working on something down near the cabin, and I'm just kind of sitting on a fallen log, just chilling out. And I heard this really weird, like long whistle, like, and I assumed it was them down by the cabin doing something. And I went back down there. When I got back down there, I was like, hey, which one of you guys was whistling down here? And they all, like, every one of them was like, nope, wasn't us. And they swear up and down they weren't whistling, but it definitely wasn't a bird. It was just a long sustained whistle. And, it sounded like it was coming from kind of my right, kind of away from the cabin, but not so far away from the cabin that it couldn't have been one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But they've had, like, they would be working on the cabin and they would be like, oh, what'd you say? And the other guy's like, I didn't say anything to you. He's like, no, you just asked me for something, but I couldn't hear what. So they would hear a lot of the kind of the, they would hear gibberish.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it sounded like talking, but it wasn't talking. Yeah. So
like on the Sierra sounds.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. The Sierra sounds are pretty fascinating. We had Ron Moorhead on the show one night and talked about that. And those are pretty incredible. They sent those to be analyzed by the Navy, and they said it exhibited characteristics of a language, but it couldn't be human because it had peaks and valleys above and below what humans are capable of.
Yeah. And the natives here, some of them believe, they kind of lean more into the more mystical side of Bigfoot, where their version of the Nantinaq used to be human.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you guys the story of Mumchuck real quick. Mumchuck, this is a Port Chatham story because this happened here. He was out hunting with some of the members of his tribe one day, and Mumchuck just one day gets up they're in this bidarka. It's like a canoe, and he gets up to the front of the bidarka and he goes, "All right, guys, drop me off over here. I'm gonna go live in the woods with an Nantinaq and become an Nantinaq." And they try and talk him out of it, and he's like, "Nope, I'm gonna do it." So they don't know what to do with him, so they just drop him off. And they go back to the village and they tell his wife, and they're like, and she doesn't, she's all distraught about it. Well, so the hunting party, they're out near the village one day, and Mumchuck comes walking up to him, and he's all covered in fur, and he can barely talk. He's like talking, he'll talk, and he's like whistling too at the same time, like he's having a hard time doing human speech. And he tells them, he says, tell my wife to take the kids and lock them up and tell her not to be out walking around, because I'm afraid I'm going to kidnap her and bring her into the woods to be an Nantinaq with me. And so they're like, all right, we'll do that for you. And they say every now and then for years after, they would see him walking around outside the village. And they said they'd always know he was around because the village cats would start to go missing. They thought he was eating the cats. So that's one of the few times I've ever heard of a Bigfoot possibly eating cats.
A creepy legend, a creepy story.
Irene Durant has a question. She says, "Do the ones in Alaska mimic other animals?"
I don't have any specific stories that I can point to and say that they do, but I have heard, just blanket tribal legends that they do, that they're mimics and that they can make the sound of other animals. And in line with the Nantinaq legend, they believe that he can actually shapeshift into other animals. There's another story of a hunter that was out hunting one day, saw a Nantinaq, decides he's going to shoot it, takes a shot at it. It falls into this copse of trees. He runs up. He's like, I shot the Nantinaq, runs up to it, looks into the copse of trees, and this little mouse runs off. And he says, the Nantinaq turned into a mouse and ran away. And personally, I think that probably the Nantinaq ran away and the mouse just happened to be in the copse of trees. But, that's part of their legend and belief of the Nantinaq, is that it can shapeshift.
Yeah,
Somebody was asking how to spell that.
Nantiinaq.
Glad I would never have sounded that out spelling that.
Mm-hmm. And that's the tribal name for Sasquatch or Bigfoot?
Well, for the natives here on the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula, and you've got I'm trying to remember the Shugston natives, and you've got the Denina people that both live down here. Mm-hmm. And the Denina, they have a name for it as well, and it's very similar. It's called the Nantina, and that translates to the one that steals us. Really? So that's creepy as hell. Yeah.
That's terrifying.
Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
No, I just said that's terrifying.
Yeah. So Nantinaq, the one with a K, that I get into this a little bit in the book. So I hear 3 or 4 different ways that it translates. The first says that it just means wild, hairy, or big, hairy thing. The other one says that it means half man, half beast. And this is all for the same word, Nantinaq. It's almost like choose your own adventure. Like, well, what do you want it to mean? Right. I said, let's see. We got big, hairy thing. Half
where does
human,
hairy man come from?
Hairy man's a little bit more up north in the interior. And then they say that it just doesn't translate well, that it just doesn't there's not a good translation for it to English. And I like that. I like that version. I like the one that's just like, we don't know what the hell it means, because it's a mystery, just like the creature itself. So that's the translation that I go with, that it just doesn't translate well.
I found that in digging through, research for books and this, that, and the other, that just pretty much every tribe's got a different name.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that's so compelling about Bigfoot, about the legend, is all these tribes that are separated by, thousands of miles of, inhospitable terrain. You've got the natives in Alaska and the natives, on the East Coast, and they all have such similar legends of the similar creatures. I mean, it's that's pretty compelling to me.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, and I think in a previous show, DA had mentioned, these are tribes that are so geographically isolated. They don't have a common culture. Yeah, and to have such similar stories is really kind of fascinating. It wasn't like they had Wikipedia, where a Navajo person is looking up what a Lakota person said it was, what an Inuit person said it was. It's like you said, it's compelling.
Cultures that had no contact with each other, like the Algonquin and the Navajo. They never, as far as I know, they never met. Alyssa asks, do you Bigfoot in Alaska turn trees upside down and replant them? We were discussing that earlier.
Yeah, so that's something that you see on Prince of Wales Island with the upside down trees with the roots sticking up. Personally, in all the areas that I've been where there's been activity, I haven't seen anything like that. I think that's pretty much just specific to Prince of Wales Island. Personally, I don't necessarily think it's Bigfoot behavior. I think it was probably related to the logging. But like I was telling these guys earlier, like I've heard that those trees predate the logging coming into Prince of Wales Island. So I don't know. I don't know if Bigfoot did it or not. But just given my experience in other areas where I know there's been Bigfoot activity and I haven't seen anything like that, I'm a little on the fence with that. I don't really know if they do that or not. I think probably, but like I said, in some places you hear about tree knocks and other places you hear about whistles. So maybe that's something that the Bigfoot in and around Prince of Wales Island do that other Bigfoot don't. And granted, I have never been there personally, which something I hope to rectify. But in some of the research I've done on Port Chatham, there were pictures that were supposedly taken at Port Chatham of the trees upside down like that. Now, we didn't see any like that while we were there. Now, in some of the areas where you've got some of these big cliff faces, in the tide comes in and out, you'll see trees get deposited kind of upside down on the shoreline.
Mhm.
And if it's on the shoreline, a lot of times, I think that's probably the work of the tide. Now, if you're in the middle of the woods and it happens, that's a different story. But I mean, and I've also, somebody was telling me here not too long ago of up along the banks of some of the rivers, the natives will take the trees that get washed in, and they'll use the water, and they'll do that. They'll shove them into the mud upside down, and then they'll sit in the roots and fish in the river. So that's humans doing it. So I don't know. I would have to see a Bigfoot doing it for me to make my final decision on that.
That episode of Alaskan Triangle I watched, was Chuck Rowley was out in Prince of Wales Island, and he found 3 or 4 right in the same area, and they were nowhere near the coast. And some of them were like twice and 3 times his height. Yeah,
and that's why I lean toward it's either Bigfoot or logging. If you read Robert Alley's book, Raincoast Sasquatch, there's pictures of the trees, the upside down trees in that. And I don't want to misquote it, but I want to say he mentioned something about logging. I can't remember if he attributes it to logging or not, but there's some talk of logging in the trees. Mm-hmm. And that might be where he's saying like the trees were like that before the loggers got here. So I don't want to say one way or the other, but that's a really good book. If you're interested in Bigfoot on in Alaska or that area of the Rain Coast in there, southeast Alaska, that's a great book.
I'll have to have you text me the name of that. Because I will never spell it correctly. And then that's one of the books I'm going to add to my collection. Yeah. Sal Paso says, question, is there a common nexus between the tribes in regards to their beliefs in these creatures?
Well, again, I'm going to reference Raincoast Sasquatch. Robert Alley actually has a chart in Raincoast Sasquatch, and it talks about the different tribes of Southeast Alaska and Washington. And it'll have like the name of the Bigfoot, and then it'll say has the ability to speak, can shapeshift, and all the little boxes are checked for the ones that share common beliefs.
I've got to get that book now.
It's cool. And I tell you, it was published in like 2001 or something, 2002, and there's pictures in the book of nests that were found on Prince of Wales Island.
Nice.
Like the ones that the Olympic Project found. And I mean, this was years before the Olympic Project found their nests. And it's kind of
What was the name of the author?
J. Robert Alley.
And it's Rain Coast Sasquatch?
Yeah.
Found it. I will post the link in the chat room if anybody's interested in looking at the book.
That is a great book. That is anybody on the Rain Coast that's interested in Bigfoot, you should have that book. And mine.
I wanted to quickly interject something, not to put a damper on things, but I'm sure DA and Steve at least are familiar with Cahokia.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I mean, in the 1200s, it was bigger than London. It was a big town. And it was situated, I believe, real close to where St. Louis is now, but I'm
right across the river. It's over in Cahokia, Illinois, and Alton.
So one of the things that they discovered in Cahokia were shells from the West Coast, and I mean, there are things that have proven to come from New England, from the Southwest. And my point is that when this stuff comes along the trade route, that kind of makes the tribes not necessarily so
unconnected.
Yeah. And you have to assume that some of the stories come along with some of the trinkets that are being traded.
Well, yeah, that makes
and
sense.
I'm not trying to put a damper on things, but I do like for people to understand that Native Americans are not as uncivilized.
Well, the Cahokia Mountains being right there on the Mississippi River Delta, they could have easily gone up all the way up to Missoula, Montana, following the Missouri River, because St. Louis is right there at the confluence of the Mississippi and the Missouri. They could have gone as far north as the Great Lakes, all the way down to, and that's just by water.
Right.
Yeah. It's like a North American Silk Road.
Just about. Well, then
Yeah.
you can
and it
catch
seemed to be the hub.
the Ohio River and go way up into Ohio and through there.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, it's not isolated to North America either. I mean, you've got the Yeti, you've got the Almas in Russia. I mean, it's a worldwide phenomenon.
Yowies.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. And I'm not trying to discredit it. I just always like to point out that Native Americans are a little more civilized, a little more connected than people like to.
Oh,
You know.
yeah, very advanced cultures.
Yes.
Esther Eston says, in your opinion, do Sasquatch guard cave entrances or systems?
In my opinion, I'm going to say no, because I think I don't think a Sasquatch would go into a cave. I don't think Sasquatch puts them in a place that they can't get out of. I think they like areas that are high up, like ridges and fingers and stuff like that. I think that they're pretty tactical, and they never give them. They always have more than one way out of a place.
Mhm.
I think they might maybe step into a cave for a nap or something, but I think probably. Yeah, I think they would probably post a sentry or something. I don't think they would necessarily go in there. You'd have one Bigfoot go into a cave and go to sleep. I just don't see it. I think they always have a backup plan and a backup to the backup plan to get out of an area.
I don't blame him. That's just good common sense. Werewolf 5674 says, I love your take on things, Beans. There are so many people that feel they know the truth. Your analytics are solid. I don't know the truth and never will till I see.
Yeah, I'll be the first to admit I don't know shit.
Same here.
I have theories. I think there's reasons why they do the things they do, but I don't know anything.
It's right now. It's no matter how many TV shows or books you have to your credit, it's all just theory. I mean,
Right.
you watch some of these shows, and sometimes they'll have people that they bring forth, and I especially love when they call somebody an expert on the subject, because there is no experts on the subject.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's a fine line to make entertaining TV and truthful TV, and it seems like they're always wanting to sacrifice one for the other.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a fascinating subject, and it'd be really. I think I'm kind of like you in ideology. I joke around with the guys on our show, because we talk about cryptids a lot, that I'm kind of an agnostic when it comes to that. I really want to believe, but I want something more than a grainy photograph and an eyewitness testimony in order to be sold. And I think you have the enviable position that you know enough to know what you don't know. The rest of us don't know enough to even know what we don't know, and we're just grasping at any little tacit bit of information that we can get. And I'd love to have evidence. If they're an endangered species, I don't really want to see a body. I hate to see one get killed unnecessarily, but I'd like to know what the hell they are.
Well, I fall back to the same thing with any other hunting. I'm not going to shoot anything I don't intend to eat unless it's trying to kill me.
Yeah, and I go through periods where I've been out enough, and I've had enough stuff happen to me that I'm almost certain they're out there. But I'll still go through periods where I'm like, well, I'm my own worst critic. I'm like, well, maybe that wasn't what I heard, or maybe because I've been out, especially down in Washington, and heard all kinds of crazy tree knocks and screams and stuff. And I'm just like, well, maybe it was the mountain lion, or maybe it was this, or I don't think mountain lions sound like T-Rexes, but it's just I just doubt myself, and it's going to take probably a good visual sighting for me to be like 100% there.
Yeah.
I know for a fact, though, I've heard a mountain lion near my campsite down in I think it was the Jacks Fork River down in southern Missouri. Heard a mountain lion. It was probably 30 yards from our camp, and I felt that. I mean, I could feel the power of that. I felt that in my chest. I'm like, God dang, that was close. So first thing we did was scoop the kids up and put them in the camper, and then I got my shotgun out. I'm like, if it comes into camp, I'm shooting it. But it never did. We heard it the one time, and it moved away.
When I was in college in the mid-'90s, Missouri had not universally admitted that we have mountain lions. there were hunters and others outdoorsmen that had seen them or heard them or whatever. But the official stance of the Department of Conservation was that there aren't any mountain lions in Missouri. And I had a lab instructor who was doing his research on mountain lions, and he was convinced they were there. And most of his colleagues, basically said he was a dumb hippie. And now it's common knowledge that Missouri has mountain lions. I've seen them myself.
They've been seen in towns.
I drive through the national forest, and I've seen a juvenile walking on the side of the road, and I know what a damn mountain lion looks like. It was broad daylight. I had a good view of it, and like you said, there was here in Springfield, we DA and I live in the same town. It's about 160,000 people. Somebody saw a mountain lion in one of the neighborhoods here in town. And it was just in somebody's backyard.
Coming in farther and farther every year.
Yeah. Well, my aunt that lives in Kentucky, one of her neighbors, they live in a pretty rural area. One of her neighbors killed a wolf that was getting into their chicken coop and took the body to I think it was Western Kentucky University. And they were like, yep, that's a wolf. And Fish and Game were like, oh, there's no wolves here. It must have just came across the Ohio River in the wintertime when it was frozen, and it's probably the only one. But I saw a picture of it. It was so long ago, it was a Polaroid picture, but it was real.
Marshall Sirota asks, are the Kandahar giants a type of Bigfoot creature?
I don't know enough about the Kandahar giant to probably answer that with any sort of authority, but I don't know. I would have to speculate on that. I'm not sure. Yeah.
I'd have to agree with you there, but I would lean more toward as they've described, in Central Alaska, there being tales of true giants. I think it would probably be something similar to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think
Alyssa says environmental DNA test kits trace for unknown species hit with Bigfoot as a chimpanzee unidentified. That's what they did on Expedition Bigfoot. Yeah. I love that show. I can't wait for the third season to come out.
There's a lake up on top of one of the mountains just behind Port Chatham, where the town used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to get up there so bad and do some environmental DNA. I just think that would just. Man, there's no telling what that would yield. But getting up there, getting up there is going to be a debacle, and then getting the funds to do the environmental DNA is another debacle. So, unless some enterprising TV producer out there wants to fund it, it's probably not going to happen.
Well, stranger things have happened, and if I ever have the funds, you can bet your butt I'm mounting a Port Chatham expedition. Actually,
they were filming there this summer. I don't know what the show is or where it's going to air, but they were filming a show there this summer, and I actually wasn't able to participate. But I don't know who it was or what the show is going to be about. It's going to be some kind of cryptid type show, I imagine.
I'll be looking for that one to come out. RJ says, even seeing a giant man 46 to 50 feet away in wide open ground, you still don't check the box and say, oh, yep, that's what that is. My brain just went, bzz. Yeah, I would be there. If I saw some, 15 to 20 foot thing, I don't care what it was, and it was getting close, my brain's not going to try to classify it. It's going to find the nearest exit.
Yeah.
Well, how many stories have you heard about people out looking for Bigfoot? They see something that looks like Bigfoot, and they don't get a picture. They don't hit record. I'll tell you guys a story about the Port Chatham FLIR footage. So we were walking through this nice flat area that it kind of opened up, and Mary Beth was walking next to me. She stops and she's like, man, do you feel like we're being watched? And I was like, well, no, not particularly. And the area we were in, it did have kind of a creepy vibe to it, but I just kind of attributed it to it because it was so wide open, as opposed to all the thick woods we'd been walking through, and we finally come out in this open area. So she pulls out her FLIR, and I pull mine out, and we start, FLIRing the tree line that's in front of us. And the only way I can describe it, guys, is I had my FLIR set to where black was hot.
Mm-hmm. I've got
And
that footage.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you the story.
Okay,
So I'm fleering, and I see what I can only describe as Donkey Kong. It's got a wide body, a little head with no neck, and it's doing this. It's raising its arms up and down like that. And like I said, we're there looking for Bigfoot. That's what we're there for. We're filming a documentary looking for Bigfoot. I see something in my binocular or my FLIR that looks like Bigfoot. And you know what I did? I go, "Hey, what does that look like to you?" And handed the FLIR off to somebody else. So I handed the FLIR off to the cameraman's brother who was there helping us out. He was just like carrying batteries and stuff. And he's a younger kid. He was in his 20s, and he looks and he goes, "It looks like a dude." And then I think he hands it off to somebody else. So by the time, because I think the only person that didn't see it was the cameraman, Josiah, and Steven. And they were behind us filming, like Steven was putting one of the trail cameras up or something. They were filming that, and we'd walked on ahead of them. And we're sitting there, and we watched this thing for I don't know how many minutes. And finally, they hand the FLIR back to me, and we started moving forward. And as we start moving forward, it starts receding back into the tree line. And it dawns on me, like, I need to hit record. So I stopped and hit record on the FLIR, and I got the footage that I sent you, which is just terrible. It's just a blob squatch. I mean, there's a black blob, and at one point, if you squint, you can kind of see it maybe take a step. And then we continued going forward, and eventually it disappeared. And when I say it disappeared, I mean it looked like it receded back into the woods.
The boobies.
Yeah. What was
You
that?
get that?
What was that?
No.
Booby.
I'm gonna be showing you my boobies tonight.
I
What it
see a
sound like?
booby.
What is
We're gonna
that?
go to bed without.
What the hell is that?
Yeah,
You
What
get
does it
that?
sound
I
like?
have no idea.
booby.
I'm gonna be showing you my boobies tonight.
What is
What
that?
the hell is
I see
going
a
on?
booby.
I have no idea. I don't know what that was.
I apologize, folks. I don't know what that was or where it came from.
So this is the only tab that I have open. It's
What
not me.
what does it sound like? If it must be coming from me.
It was like a woman and a child talking.
Yeah,
I don't have
know.
any video up anywhere else.
Yeah, I don't have anything up either.
That is freaking weird.
Kind of creepy.
Yeah.
I
Well-
hear like thumping and
Well, it's gone now, thank God. But Beans, I'll play that footage. It's going to mute all of our mics while it's playing. But I'll go ahead and show that now. Well, that was the footage, no audio for that, but that I could see it move, but you could also see the FLIR was moving a little bit too. But at one point, you could see it move. I wish you'd been recording the whole time. That would have been awesome.
I mean, it's Curse of Bigfoot, man. I don't know why I didn't just hit record as soon as I saw it. If I did, it probably would have been some of the best FLIR footage ever. But here we are. So, but I hear stories like that all the time where people are like, "Oh, I saw this or I heard this and I didn't hit record," or for whatever reason, or they handed the camera off to somebody else. Say, "Hey, look at that." So,
Well, I have to admit that if I was, hanging out someplace and saw something like that in a camera, I would literally hand it off to DA or whoever I was with. I'm like, yeah, I can't believe this shit. What is that? And
Wolfgang said, "Did you have any impression as to how big it was?"
Not really. No, there wasn't a good sense of scale. Obviously, I mean, it was about 40, 50 feet away, maybe more. And again, we didn't do a recreation like we should have, but we were like, let's go get it, like, let's keep going. So we didn't think to like stop and do a recreation and all that good stuff. And plus our time was really limited there on the ground. Cause every night we were there was like an extra $2,000 for the boat. So we're like, we gotta do as much as we can, as quick as we can. So we weren't able to like really take our time. There were a couple of tracks that we found that I probably would have tried to cast. Mm-hmm. But again, we had that time factor, and it's like, okay, I can sit here, for 45 minutes mixing up the plaster and setting it and getting it poured. Or I can go, I can keep walking and maybe even like have a sighting. Yeah. So it was kind of that, I had to make a choice basically. I could either, do a really, really thorough investigation, or I could keep pushing and seeing what I could see.
Well, as much as I would want to cast that track myself, I think you probably made the right call trying to get closer. Yeah. Because you get that good visual, you get it on video. You can go back and cast the track later, but getting that good video is the key.
Yeah, and like I said, we were just, plus that was really my first. I'd been out walking in the woods looking for Bigfoot before, but that was my first like expedition where I'm actually like trying to get some evidence. Most of the time when I went out, I was just going out for myself to try and get, a picture or a video or something like that. I wasn't really like, I'm going to like cast everything I find. And I have found some really nice bear tracks I wish that I'd cast in the past, but it would be nice to have those as a comparison to potential Bigfoot tracks. If I could cast some of those bear tracks I've found.
Sorry about that. Hey, it's just a little bit after the top of the hour on the first hour, and we're here with Larry Beans Baxter tonight. We'll take a quick break to have a word from our sponsor over at Dark Angel Medical. If everybody wants to go grab a refill of coffee or whatever you're drinking tonight, I will set up the Dark Angel clip, and we'll be back in just a couple of moments, folks. If you guys aren't familiar with Dark Angel Medical, you've heard me talk about them many times, and you've seen them show up in my books as well. Dark Angel Medical is a veteran-owned company, and they provide what's called the kit for life. You stock that medical kit, and you use it. You use that kit to save a life. They will resupply the kit for life. And Dark Angel is a fantastic company. It was one of the trauma kits I carried on my belt as an officer for years, and in my opinion, they're the best med kits in the book. In the business. And I don't just say that because Carrie Davis is my buddy, but because the kits are just that good. I carried one for years. And if you guys have not had a chance to go over by darkangelmedical.com, I would encourage you to do so, because anything you do, if you're going out in the woods looking for Bigfoot or just going out hunting, hiking, fishing, anything like that, if an injury happens, you're going to need a med kit.
Hey everybody, this is Kerry Pocket Doc Davis from Dark Angel Medical, and you are listening to DA Ex Machina with DA Roberts. You may recognize me or some of my products from Dark Angel Medical in some of the Apex Predator, Lakeview Man, and Wild Hunt books, and you can get those products at www.darkangelmedical.com, along with training classes on how to use those products and save a life. Shoot us an email at info@darkangelmedical.com and be the difference.
And I'd like to take this moment to remind you folks to hit that like and subscribe and share button on the YouTube channel, because we are that close to breaking the 1,000 mark. I mean, we are tantalizingly close. Last time I checked, we were like within 35. In fact, I'm going to check it right now just so you know how many we are. But it's getting really close for that giveaway. We are 30 away from hitting the magic 1,000. And as soon as we hit that, we'll be doing the big giveaway for the out of print book, and maybe throw in some other stuff as well. So thank you guys for making that possible. And we are, like I said, we are just that close from hitting our goal. And I want to thank everybody for making that possible. And thank you guys for being here and joining us. Steve, how's your Wi-Fi holding up?
Not too bad so far. I still don't know exactly what took me down earlier. It's still storming like hell down here. I keep seeing lightning flashes, but so far so
Might have
good.
just
Did you guys hear
interrupted
me
your
okay?
signal. Yeah, we still
I
hear you
don't.
fine.
Well, my whole laptop went down. Like it just cut to black, and so I don't know if the battery just got low enough it glitched or what. But while I was rebooting, I plugged it into the wall, and knock on wood, we've been okay. But,
I just checked with my husband to make sure he wasn't watching some kind of funky porn.
It sounded like a TikTok video, something a little short, like a woman and a child talking about breastfeeding or something.
Yeah.
But Josh is looking into it now. He's my tech guy, so trust me, I could look for a week and never find it, and Josh will go, "It's right there."
Yeah, Josh is on the hunt for the boobies.
All right. It's not
sometimes
a booby hunt.
Sometimes I've got technical issues with the computer, and I'll get a hold of Josh, and it's not quite as bad as this, but the old joke about they just press caps lock and walk off when I ask why my password doesn't work. It's almost that bad. I suck at tech.
You've committed a few ID 10T errors, have you?
That I have.
Yeah.
Well, folks, appreciate you guys sticking with us. We are back. We are going to jump right back into this as soon as Mr. Baxter is ready to roll, and we'll be taking more of your questions. And I appreciate you guys jumping right in, and had a lot of great conversation and questions tonight. Beans, welcome back, sir.
Thank you.
Were you ready?
You freshly caffeinated?
Yeah. Gotta drink some caffeine.
Oh yeah, gotta live on the coffee, man. What kind of coffee do you drink?
Me, usually just whatever I can get at Costco. I buy pretty much in bulk because we got to drive like 4 hours up to Anchorage to go to a Costco. So I'll buy a couple of months worth of whatever they have. Usually like a variety pack or something.
I've been drinking a lot of Black Rifle coffee.
Yeah, I used to get that occasionally, but it's cheaper for me to go the Costco route. There's things that I can choose to spend money on, and it's not that I don't like Black Rifle or don't support them, but it's just coffee's I'm not a coffee snob. It all tastes the same to me. As long as it keeps me going, that's all I really care about. So
with me writing full time, I refer to my coffee as productivity juice, and I pretty much have to have it.
It's a business expense.
It's definitely a business expense.
Gentlemen,
what was that? Your phone that was playing?
my husband's phone in the kitchen sent that through our Wi-Fi.
Holy crap!
Well, now the important question: what was your husband watching it for?
He was scrolling, and it. You know how Facebook has those little mini videos?
It's like suggested videos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it popped up, and that's where it came from. So it was my computer, Josh.
Okay. All right. Well, that was mystery solved. I thought we'd been hacked. I'm like, what the? Somebody in here? What the hell's going on?
Well, and the fun story there is I was recording yesterday, and right in the middle of a recording, somebody was playing very loud rock music, not very well. And it blasted my ears. So we need to figure out what's going on with our Wi-Fi.
Well,
RJ says, don't tell Josh, just let him keep looking.
I'm down here on a secured Wi-Fi with a password, but the same password is used in the whole resort. I'm like, maybe somebody's having more fun down here at the cottages than I am.
Hey, man. You go out and walk along the shore. You might lift the pant leg a little bit. You might attract a Bigfoot.
There you go.
Looking for love out in the woods.
You bet. Anyway, yeah, sorry about that, guys.
No problem. At least the mystery's solved now. We know what it was. Beans, how many times have you been to Port Chatham?
I have been twice now.
I'm jealous. I want to go there so bad. It's one of the places I've got on my bucket list that I want to go to before, I can no longer do it anymore.
That glare is driving me crazy. I don't know what's causing it.
The light over your head.
Need a wide brimmed hat. Get you a big sombrero.
I've got one. I just don't have it with me. It's upstairs.
That would be hilarious.
The first time we went was for the filming of the documentary In Search of the Port Chatham Hairy Man. And then the second time we went was for the Alaska Triangle for the Travel Channel. And I have to say, the first time we went, I left that place thinking like, this is where I want to retire. Like, I want to buy some property around here and build a cabin, and I want to live off the land and look for Bigfoot. And that's what I want to do. And the second time we left, I felt like the place was trying to kill me, and I was lucky to get out of there in my life.
So definitely not the place you want to build a cabin.
Yeah, my opinion of it changed a little bit that second time, and I think Stephen and Adam kind of feel the same way, as to where we're like, we're not saying never as far as going back, but it would definitely, like, it would take a little bit to coax me back. It's going to have to be more than just a, here, we'll give you a donut and put you on TV.
So there's no evidence. Let me do this. So I'll pass us. Go ahead.
Oh, so he's asking if if I said there was no evidence of Bigfoot chasing people off. So, in my research, what I found, I'm going to have to turn that light down again here in a second. What I found is that the town was basically abandoned for more economic reasons than Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. But there's definitely stories of Bigfoot. There's sightings there. There's a history of sightings. There's a history of people going missing. There's a history of, strange deaths, but I don't think that's the reason why the town ultimately died. It was more of an economic reason. I don't want to go too far into it because I want people to buy my book.
Well, I'm going to be getting your book.
Yeah, that's not a problem. We're going to buy the book.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sitting here telling you like there's nothing to Port Chatham. It's all a bunch of crap, because there's definitely some stuff going on there. There's definitely, I mean, I told you the FLIR story. I mean, I have no doubt in my mind that it's perfect habitat for Sasquatch. And, there's some other weird stuff going on there, like some almost Skinwalker Ranch type stuff. I can't say that I particularly experienced anything paranormal, but we had some weird stuff happen the second time I went back. And then you've got a bunch of tales of people seeing strange things there. The one story I mentioned in the book is the Dark Lady, where it's basically like a ghost story that the natives told about this lady that came out of the cliffs, and she wore a dark dress, and she would walk up along the shore, and the dress would drag behind her. And I've only found that one mention of her from that lady, Melania Kell. Mm-hmm. I haven't heard anybody else talk about her ever in the history of Port Chatham except for her. So I can't corroborate any stories about her, but definitely lots of Bigfoot stories coming out of there. Lots of sightings, lots of a history of sightings there. One of my favorite like non-Bigfoot stories to come out of there. This is, you guys will love this. Again, we're with the hunters and their bidarkas and their little canoes, and they're paddling around not far from Port Chatham, and they see another bidarka full of hunters, and they're like, well, who are those guys? They're not from our village, and I don't recognize them from any of the other villages. So they decide, well, let's catch up to them and see, who they are, and let's see what they got, see if they want to trade. So they start paddling, and as they get closer, the other canoe of hunters, the strangers, they start paddling faster, like they're trying to get away from them. And they're like, well, this is weird, because they're hailing them like, hello, like, who's there? So eventually they're young and strong. So they catch up with the other canoe, the canoe full of strangers. And when they catch up to them, they're like, hey guys, like, where are you guys from? What are you doing? And the strangers are in the canoe, and they won't look at them. They turn their faces away like this, and finally they're like, come on guys, what's going on? Why are you acting that way? Why are you being weird? And so finally the strangers in the canoe turn around and look at them, and they've all got one eye in the center of their foreheads.
Oh.
And they say, we stay away from you two white people because, you treat us bad and you're mean to us. And we live in a secret village, like not far from here, and we, don't really want anything to do with you. And the young hunter's like, oh, well, we didn't know about you. Would you like to trade some meat? So they trade meat and have an amicable conversation. And then the one-eyed strangers, they paddle off, and the young hunters paddle off in their direction, and they never see them again.
That's
Well,
weird.
I knew you guys would like that one.
That is really weird.
I would never point at somebody with one eye and go, "Look at you, one eye." That would be rude. I got two eyes. You don't.
I mean, I might. I'm kind of an ass, but
Well, yeah, you are, but no, that's wild. That is just crazy.
Lord.
So, what other kind of crazy things go on up there, Beans?
Let's see. What's another story that would be a good one to tell? There's the gentleman who he was pulling up to the dock in his fishing boat, and he was walking to the end of the dock to get a tote to put his catch of the day in, put his fish in. And he's walking down the dock there. He notices there's three little kids sitting on the dock with their back to him, facing the water. And he walks by them, and he goes and gets his tote, and he's like, well, that's kind of weird, because this is a different time. This is back in the 30s and 40s, and people respected their elders back then. And if you saw somebody coming, or you said good afternoon, sir or ma'am, or whatever, kids were things were different.
Right.
So he says, well, I'm gonna say something to those kids when I walk back. I'm gonna admonish them for not greeting me. So he gets his tote, and he turns around, and he's pushing his tote down the dock, and he walks by, and the kids are gone. And there was nowhere for them to go. They were there 1 second, and then they just disappeared. So that story creeps me out, because whenever I picture those kids, I always picture that kid from The Grudge. Remember that movie?
Yeah.
That's what I picture in my head when I picture those kids sitting there on the dock.
Yeah, that would be pretty terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, when you're out in the middle of nature and you lose track of something like that, you're like, oh.
Yeah. That's the thing. If you were out in the woods and saw Bigfoot, I don't know which would be more terrifying, seeing it or losing track of it.
Yeah.
I think knowing it's there and not knowing where it's at would be the bigger butt puckering moment for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that especially if you saw it like in the direction you had to go to get out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Like
and it wasn't acting friendly, like beating on the ground and throwing sticks and tree branches and stuff. And then suddenly it's just gone. Like, oh, this is going to be a long walk.
Well, would you, if you accept the fact that they are much larger than we are, we've heard reports of, 7, 8, 12, 15 feet, if an 8-foot humanoid vanishes near me, it's going to scare the hell out of me, because that's not the kind of thing you just misplace.
Well, they're masters of their surroundings. I mean, people call them forest ninjas for a reason, because they're perfectly in harmony with their surroundings. I mean, it's something that we can't mimic.
I think a lot of times they either lay down or they just squat down and turn in, not literally, but they turn in. If they just crouch down and do this, I think they look like a tree stump. And I think a lot of times they just blend in, or they just turn around and stand still, and it just looks like a tree.
Well, look at these trained soldiers in ghillie suits. I mean, you could walk right up to one of those where they could touch you, and a lot of times you don't see them. I mean, that's how they pass sniper school. And that's a 180-pound man. It's a scary thought.
Now, here's a good question. Why are they so mean? So I don't necessarily think that they're mean as in they're being malicious. I think they're kind of like a lot of other animals. If you get between them and their young or their food or their shelter, I think that they can become mean. But I think otherwise they're probably just like any other animal, and they just want to be left alone.
Yeah. Well, most animals have a couple of concentric circles of area that they interact with. As you start to come in and approach, you get within a threat radius where they try to get away from you. And then if you continue to close on them, you get into a tighter circle where you're in their attack radius, and they don't try to flee anymore. They're going to attack you. And, who knows what kind of a radius an animal that big has,
Yeah.
This comment that's on the screen here about the Harry and the Hendersons, I remember reading some trivia about that, where basically when they filmed that shot, they just had those Bigfoots. They were just standing there, and the crew was like, well, are they going to like digitize them out or something? Because they're standing right there. And the director was like, no, nobody's going to see it. Trust me. And they're like, no, they're right there. And he goes, you're just seeing them because they're there. And then sure enough, like when they screened the film, nobody saw them
until they stepped out.
That's actually kind of brilliant.
Yeah.
There's another movie. It was one of those sci-fi channel. Is this my computer again?
I'm not hearing anything.
I'm the only one hearing it. Okay. All right, then.
I was hearing something, but I think it is on your end.
Well, I'm going to tell this, and then I think I'm going to have to call it a night because I don't know what he's watching, but it keeps coming over the. But anyway, it was one of those made-for-TV sci-fi channel movies. Mm-hmm. There was a guy in a cabin, and there were some girls in the cabin next door, and some kind of giant Bigfoot came down out of the mountain, was eating them all. Anyway, at the end of the movie, he and one of the girls managed to get into a station wagon, and they're driving away, and they crash, and the EMTs come in, and the sheriff comes to rescue them. They put them in the ambulance. They're driving away, and all of the cops and the EMTs are standing there, and they look up, and all these eyes light up around them.
That was the movie Abominable. That was pretty good.
That's it. That was the movie Abominable. That I knew you'd know it if I talked about it. Yeah, and they realized they were surrounded, and I was like, "Oh, you can't end now. I need to see these guys slaughtered."
That was actually the movie I thought of when I suggested the animation for our background with the lightning and the rain and the eyes popping in and out.
Yeah,
that was actually when I said, "Hey, can you guys do this?" And Adam Shepard, of course, animated it for us. But that was exactly the movie I was thinking of. I'm like, "Oh, with the eye shine in the background."
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know what he's out there watching, but it keeps coming over my. And
we've only heard the one thing, so knock on wood.
Yeah, let's hope he's not watching anything else weird. It was something that he's just scanned through on Facebook, though. So I mean, I don't think it would have been too strange, other than it is weird for a grown man to be talking like a baby. Yeah, I actually had an ex like that. No, he was just a baby. He didn't talk like one.
Sounds like my wife's description of me when I'm sick.
Yeah.
I was going to say, that's all
every
when they're
man
sick.
On the planet when they're sick. Yeah.
Well, you've never had the man flu, though.
That's right. It's the worst flu ever.
Yeah.
It's 10 times worse than anything else. I mean, God.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen that? It's a commercial where the guys in the hospital and all the doctors are like, they're working on him, and he's like, "Oh, I don't feel good. I'm sick." And this lady walks in, and she's got like a gunshot on her shoulder, and they're like, and she's like, "I need help. I've been shot." And they're like, "Don't you know this man has the man flu?" And they're like, all the doctors are working on him, and she goes, "I've been man shot." And then all the doctors run over her, and they're like, "Oh my God, we got to get you help."
Yeah. Anytime a man can swallow a watermelon whole, we'll talk about pain.
Damn.
Okay, you win.
I was going to say, I've been drinking since noon. I'm thinking, that's a challenge. No.
Run out and get one, Steve. Let's watch.
We'll put that on pay-per-view.
Yeah, we will.
So she didn't really get into specifics. She just said a whole watermelon. She didn't say that a blender couldn't be involved.
No, it has to be whole. It has to be intact.
Can I put vodka inside it first?
You can put Everclear in it if you want. I don't care. You might want to take a few drink the vodka by itself first. It might help ease a little bit of the pain.
So you guys were talking about the movie Abomination. I got to sample an Abomination last night. Brian brought over some devil's cut and made an old fashioned out of it.
Was it bad?
If it hadn't been an old fashioned, it probably would have been completely unpalatable. But the simple syrup and everything took enough of the edge off that it was drinkable. But I'm pretty sure that's probably will hold the record for the nastiest whiskey that you and I try to sample.
Was it worse than the old Overholt?
About comparable.
Okay, well, the old Overholt was like old West whiskey that probably would have been improved by the addition of turpentine.
Before you say that, they make pickle whiskey now. You need to try that
Pickle
before
whiskey?
you label something the worst whiskey ever.
Well, my father is a retired dentist, and he's a huge historian and fan of Doc Holliday. And he has been to the Museum of Griffin, Georgia, talked with Doc's, great grandnephews and whatever. And so apparently Doc's whiskey of choice was Old Overholt. It's still made. And there's a liquor store in Springfield that sells about 2 bottles a year of it, and I buy both of them. And it is not good. It is a rye whiskey. And DA and I were one night, as we were discussing his books, we're going to have one of our typical whiskey-fueled brainstorming sessions. So we decided we were going to make Manhattans out of this stuff because, rye is the traditional whiskey in Manhattan. The Old Overholt is probably the only whiskey on the planet that actually got better as they would cut it with turpentine along the rail line because it was not good.
It's pretty brutal.
Well, it's
Can't
$11
drink
a
this,
fifth.
but
What
I'll
do
tell you
expect?
what could make it better. We'll put some turpentine in it. Ooh.
Oh,
Yeah, no thanks. It's like running your moonshine through a car engine.
yeah, or
People do
radiator.
that. Yeah, people do that, but I don't drink it.
I've drank straight moonshine before and regretted it, but the reason we hillbillies in Missouri call it card table whiskey because one good drink and your legs will just fold right up.
I've drank quite a bit of straight moonshine before I quit drinking. I don't think it's that bad.
Depends
See,
on how strong they make it.
I just figured you would lay on your back with your 4 legs in the air like a wounded spider,
You just curl up.
drinking that. Just curl up, yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, so what else? I mean, I know that we have the whole Alaskan Triangle. Have you ever had any stories of the Kushtaka?
That's more of a southeast legend, the Kushtaka. That's more
Outside
over
of
there.
the triangle?
Yeah, and he shares a lot of similarities with the Nantinaq, though, as far as being a shape changer and kidnapper and all that. But he's more of a, they call him the land otter man. So I know there's some speculation as to whether it's just a misidentified Bigfoot, but the natives are pretty adamant it's a separate entity from the Bigfoot.
Well, it's interesting to explore the possibility. I mean, we never know what's out there. I mean, from finding giant bones out on the Aleutian Islands to missing aircraft. Heck, there was an aircraft that had a U.S. congressman on it went missing in the Alaskan Triangle, and they've never found it.
Yeah, I'm certain that probably within the last 100 years there were probably some woolly mammoths running around up here somewhere. Probably not today, but probably within the last century.
Well, they on that episode of the Alaskan Triangle, they were saying that they detected what they thought was one on a seismic sensor.
Yeah.
And that had to have been fairly recently.
That's
I don't
interesting.
think they've had seismic sensors for too awful long. Definitely within the last 100 years.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing. The earthquakes that we have up here. When the second time we went to Port Chatham when we were filming the Alaska Triangle, this didn't make it into the show, although we talked about it on camera, and I guess they didn't feel it fit the tone, or they didn't have time for it. But so we're laying, or I'm sleeping out on the deck of the boat because there wasn't enough room in the boat for everybody. So I volunteered to sleep out on I was covered by the deck, but I was sleeping outside, and all of a sudden the boat shook, like boom. And I remember waking up and I was like, what the hell was that? Because I thought something had hit the boat, or I was like, oh man, our anchor came loose and we drifted ashore or something. And I heard the guys talking on the boat, and I heard them say something about like, oh, earthquake. And we do have earthquakes up here quite a bit. So I was like, oh, it must have been an earthquake. So I rolled over and went back to sleep. Well, the next day I've got an inReach that I take with me out in the field. That's a satellite communication device, because where we go, there's often not any cell service. So my wife texts me on the inReach, and she's like, did you guys feel that earthquake we had last night? Because it was a pretty big one. And I was like, yeah. And I said, hey guys, that was an earthquake we felt last night. Well, the captain of the boat, we get into an argument, not a malicious argument. We're not like yelling at each other or anything, but he's telling me, he's like, no, you can't feel an earthquake on the water. That wasn't what it was. And I'm like, well, what else was it? I'm like, we felt the boat shake. My wife's telling me there was a big earthquake last night. Like, what the hell? And he goes, no, we shouldn't have been able to feel it on the water. We're floating in the water. We shouldn't have felt it. You should only feel it on the land. And I'm like, well, if I put a boat, a little paper boat in a bathtub and shake the bathtub, the boat's going to move, So we went back. He still to this day swears up and down it wasn't an earthquake, and he doesn't know what it was. But I'm like, dude, that was an earthquake. But that was the first time I ever felt an earthquake on the water.
So can he say tsunami?
Yeah. That's certainly felt on the water.
Yeah. And they're generally caused by earthquakes. So
Yeah.
Yeah, Brachin says, Admiral Byrd said they saw creatures in Antarctica that belonged in warmer climates in an area they flew over where they saw lush green vegetation. I would love to be able to find that.
Yeah.
It's weird that Antarctica is like closed to exploration except for by certain government agencies.
Yeah.
You can't just go, I'm going to Antarctica. Like, no, you're not.
Yeah, there's a lot of paperwork.
Plus, if you've got any bad teeth, they have to be pulled before you go. And I think they also require you have your appendix out before you go.
So you guys are cutting out on me. I can't hear you.
Oh.
They said we have to have our
hand signals
appendix out.
Yeah. Well, we were just up on the North Slope. Yeah, we were just up on the North Slope not that long ago, and they were telling us, like, yeah, if they see a polar bear, like if there's a polar bear on the road, they got to like stop work. Yeah.
Yeah. And run. Oh, no. I'm sorry.
Because they're endangered.
Oh, okay. We are having issues. I'm wondering if it will help, since it seems to be coming from me, if I just drop out for the night.
I'm not noticing any issues except for people getting quiet.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a problem. So,
we are now at 975 on our subs. We are that close.
We are going to break that 1,000 yet. If you haven't subscribed yet, folks, get out there and subscribe and hit that like button. We are going to do this.
Heck yeah. So, Beans, if I wanted to get a copy of your book autographed, could I buy one directly from you? I don't think he can hear me.
I don't think
can you hear
me either.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Hello?
Hello? Yeah, we hear you.
Hello?
I hear you, but
Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Yeah,
Can you hear
there we
us?
go. I think I'm back.
Okay.
I think one of the dogs that was carrying my internet in slipped. It's like when it works great. When it doesn't work at all. There's no in between.
Get satellite internet, or you get like an internet provider?
We can get satellite internet, but I don't have it. I have it through the local like cable provider.
Have you thought about looking into Starlink, the one that Elon Musk is pointing out? It's supposed to be really good.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's available in my area yet, but when it comes here, I'll probably look into it, because the internet I have now, it kind of every year it seems like we've got to get our coax cable replaced. The frost heaves will bend it and it won't work so well. But you were asking about autographed book.
Yeah,
you can go to my website, Yeah, you can go to my website, alasquatchpodcast.com, and order one there.
Okay.
And
I will do that
you
then.
can put on there like who you want it signed to and all that, and I'll personalize it.
Awesome.
Can you put that website up?
Yeah, what's the website again? I will put it up.
Hold on, I'll put it in the private chat here.
Okay. That works. It is not letting me post again. It did that last week. I'll just post it direct to the YouTube, and I will put it up on the screen here.
Where do you want it posted at?
I was just posting it to the main chat here.
I wonder why it was being so uncooperative.
There, I'll have it up on screen now.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I will, after the show tonight, I will probably be ordering one of those. Oh, anybody else got any questions? Anybody from the chat got any more questions?
The peanut gallery.
Yeah, from the peanut gallery.
I do not live in an igloo.
Aw, really? That's disappointing.
I've often told my wife I would like to go to Alaska, but she hates cold weather. So if I go, I'm probably going alone.
I don't believe in snow, so I think I'd be.
Oh, if it's below 70, it's cold.
Time.
If it's below 70, it's cold. My wife does not like cold weather.
Your wife
cold
and I
to her.
have
I
a
love
lot
cold
in common. She and I have a lot in common.
Josh, I may have missed it, Beans. Did you move up to Alaska or do this kind of research, or have you always lived up there?
Okay. Hey, how's it going? I'm doing fine.
I think he's first.
Josh, he said he moved.
Actually, the Army sent me up here, and I liked it so much I stayed. So I wasn't born here, and I didn't come up here specifically to look for Bigfoot.
And Alyssa wants to know: do Alaskan Bigfoot use tools?
He's on a bit of a delay, I think.
I think we're losing signal.
Yeah.
Somebody must have abducted one of the dogs.
Apparently. Or it just got tired and went to bed.
Yeah.
Bigfoot is eating one of the dogs.
Yeah, Richie Evans' question, have you saw one like 35 yards away or less?
I think that one that we got the FLIR footage of was probably closer than 40 yards, but I can't give a true and accurate distance on that. But I didn't see it with my naked eye either. It was through the FLIR footage.
Yeah. And Alyssa says, do Alaskan Bigfoot use tools? I have had
a report out of Port Chatham of a gentleman seeing a Bigfoot walking around with a club. And the gentleman that made the report, he's passed away, so I can't get any specifics from him. But I always found it interesting that he used the word club and not, stick or log or branch. So I haven't heard of any. Yeah. Yeah.
I immediately went to Fred Flintstone. And
exactly. Yeah.
He's looking for a girlfriend. Clunk.
Drag her away.
Wolfman says, other than FLIR footage, what's the closest encounter you've had?
Probably, it didn't happen in Alaska. It happened in Washington, and we were down there filming Bigfoot Encounters of the Pacific Northwest, which is, you can watch it for free on YouTube. And I was walking down this logging road kind of by myself. I'd let the other guys get ahead of me, and I had my back to the wood line, and I heard something behind me kind of go whoosh, 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 and just freaked me the hell out. Just utter terror. and I had to get out of there pretty quick. I didn't see anything, but it sounded like it was really close behind me, and then I was scared out of my mind for the rest of the night. It was crazy.
I would imagine that would freak me out as well.
Yeah.
There's talking Ghibli.
Yeah.
Yeah.
S. Dresden says, why Alaska?
Because
Ask that of Uncle Sam.
because it's pretty and there's not a lot of people up here, so it's perfect.
I would agree with that. That's the big appeal for me as well. Mark Napier says I'm late to the party. Well, Mark, thanks for joining us. Hellhound says, how do you go back in the woods after having an encounter?
Well, I think it really helps that I haven't had like a really good sighting, like a if I saw one and in clear broad daylight, I probably wouldn't go back. But I kind of go through the thing of like, well, there's no such thing as Bigfoot. I'm just going to go out and walk in the woods, and then probably if I did see one and it was sealed in my mind 100% that they were real, I might not ever go back. I don't know.
I've read a lot of accounts and talked to a few hunters personally that once they've seen one in the woods, they stop hunting.
Yeah. I think if I did have an encounter, even if it wasn't a menacing one, if I just saw one and knew that they were real, I might just pack up my toys and go home and be like, okay, that's it. They're real. I'm good now.
I can understand that.
Richie Evans says, I want to go to... And do you want to go with me? Do you want to DA with me? Yeah, I'll go with you, brother. Let me know when you're going. I'm always down for something crazy. I spent 4 days and 3 nights in the LBL looking for that thing. I'm ready to do it again. Mrs. Chef Yoda says, question, Beans, what do you think Bigfoot is? Where do they originate?
Well, like I said before, I don't know what they are. I don't know anything. But personally, I think that there's some kind of relic hominid. They're like Gigantopithecus or Paranthropus or something like that, and they just never evolved past that stage.
On Expedition Bigfoot, the eDNA came back with a relative of chimpanzee, but that would lean more toward primate than relic hominid. But I like I said, I think there's more than one type, depending on the part of the country you're in. And because of the way behaviors, especially they describe like the skunk ape, it behaves more like a chimp or an orangutan than it does a relic hominid.
Well, a chimpanzee is a hominid, though. It's one of the 4.
True.
You have chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, and and humans.
I guess when you put it that way, could still be a relic hominid. So, being a primate does not rule out being a relic hominid. Okay, all right, get that.
Well, I wonder about these DNA results I hear where they're like, oh, there's human, it's contaminated, and they just automatically throw it out, and it makes me wonder, like, well, maybe it's so close to human that they
maybe
can't
it's not contamination. Yeah. Maybe they just don't know what they're looking at.
Exactly.
We share over 96% of our DNA with a chimp.
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
My ex-husband shared 100%.
I tell you, I've done even better than see an orca. I have seen orcas playing with seal, like they'd throw the seals up to each other as they were eating them and tossing them back and forth.
Oh no!
It's not playing with your food.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because living on St. Paul Island, the seals. They come there to breed, and the beaches in the summer are just lined with them, and you see them and they're going out in the water and the orcas are out there eating them, and you would think that the seals would be like, oh shit, don't go in the water, the orcas are out there eating us, but they don't. They just keep going. They're just like, oh, they're not going to get me.
The odds are really good they're going to get somebody else, and if worst case scenario, shove someone in front of it. It's kind of like with penguins when sharks are in the area, they'll crowd up to the edge of the ice and eventually shove one of them in. And if it gets eaten, they don't go in. Orcas are into sushi.
Yeah, but I don't throw my sushi back and forth across the table.
Obviously,
you don't go to the right restaurant.
You've never eaten at a restaurant with my sons.
Yeah, they would throw them up like a beach ball and just pass them back and forth.
I have had rolls thrown across the restaurant at me before, but that was on purpose.
I think it'd be cool to see orcas like batting them around. I was reading somewhere, and I don't know if it was killer whales, but something will like swim past their prey and flip it up into the air with their tail.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's probably orcas. They do all kinds of weird stuff like that. They play with their food and fight over it and everything else. They just they're pretty. I think they're a lot more intelligent than we give them credit for.
I would agree. I think orcas are very intelligent.
Certainly, they're not very nice.
Luis Noriega says that's like the Channel Islands over here in California, or the walrus breed on one island, and the great whites hang out in that area. They wait for a walrus to jump in the water to see if they can catch it.
That's impressive. Think how
Adam
big a
Davis
walrus
says, like
is.
slowing down someone else if the zombie horde is coming. You don't have to be the fastest. Just kneecap somebody nearby.
Kneecap your buddy.
Estrezan says orcas do not kill humans in the wild. Have you ever heard of an orca attacking a person?
No, I can't say that. Only in movies.
The only time I've ever heard of an orca killing a person was at SeaWorld.
I heard I think one bit Bo Derek's leg off once. It was a really bad movie. Richard Harris, Bo Derek. And it's dating myself because I think it's from the 70s.
Was that the movie Orca?
I think so.
I remember that movie. Very, very cheesy.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, Bo Derek was a sex symbol of the 70s. For you youngsters in the room.
For you whippersnappers.
Yeah.
Are you planning to go back to Port Chatham anytime soon?
Not at the present. We were talking about maybe going back. What would have been this year, and like I said, that there was that other TV show that was filming in there this year, and they didn't. They decided the English Bay Corporation. They own it. They're the native corporation, and they decided they weren't going to give anybody else permission to go in there. I guess the production team that was in there this year, they were pretty adamant about being the only ones in there. So,
well, that kind of sucks.
Yeah, I don't know. If we go back, I think I would like I said, I'd like to go back with a lot more. I'd like to go back and get some eDNA. I would like to really go back and like spend a lot of time there, like maybe a week, and spend some time on the ground and camp out at night and just really do it right.
Do you think it'd be safe to camp there?
I think what we would do is you'd have to have enough people to have like a 24-hour guard on the camp. We wouldn't all go to bed. We would have somebody up awake all the time.
So let's just say, for example, I'm in Missouri. I don't know what the laws up there in Alaska would be. Let's say if we did manage to say crowdfund an expedition, what are what would be the requirements for us to get permission to carry firearms there?
Just bring it with you.
That's it.
It's Alaska.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you're not a felon, you can bring a handgun or anything you want. I mean, they're not going to stop you, and just don't be a felon with a handgun up here. You'll be all right.
If I was going to come up there, I would definitely swing by Guncrafter Industries just down the road from me. They make a Glock conversion that's in 50 caliber. It's the 50 GI cartridge. In ballistics tests, it went through 42 inches of ballistics gel. I think that'll stop something.
Yeah. You don't need a permit to carry concealed up here. So
you don't in Missouri either, but a lot of states are kind of weird about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't own a gun, so.
Well, I would definitely want to have one for sure.
Oh yeah, I would not want to go just for the bears alone. I mean, you've got dangerous animals aplenty without throwing Bigfoot into the mix.
Yeah, I go out my backyard sometimes and play with my dogs, and I don't take a gun, but I probably should, because like I said, I've got bears and moose in my backyard, and I usually have one handy like by the front door or something where I can run and grab it real quick. But I mean, that's depending on where you live, you've got nature just right outside your door.
Yeah, I don't have anything against anybody having a gun. I just don't have the common sense God gave a mule when it comes to firearms. I'll hurt somebody.
Papa Bear
So
says he's got enough guns for you, Naoma.
yeah, Papa Bear has me covered. If I have to go anywhere dangerous, I take Papa Bear with me.
Definitely. Which is good since you're related.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm his mama, so he knows to protect me.
Yeah.
You mentioned you went up to Prudhoe Bay. Are there any stories from up there? Any Bigfoot sightings?
Well, once you get up past the Arctic Circle, you don't hear a whole lot up that way. But down below the Arctic Circle, you hear stories around that area of them living around in there and around the lakes and the streams in there. But yeah, once you get kind of past the Arctic Circle, it kind of starts turning into tundra, and there's not a lot of cover, a lot of tree cover. So you don't hear as many stories up there.
Sally, you're absolutely right. I'd want a 50 Beowulf with a 458 SOCOM, one of the two. I'm not carrying a small rifle if I go up there. What's that rifle, that lever action Marlin that's supposed to be rated against T-Rex? It was the one they used in Jurassic World. That's a big, I think it's a 4570.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Adam
I've
Davis says
shot
you
one
need
of
some of those loud tripwire traps that use Magnum shotgun primers. That'd be a hell of a tripwire trap.
Yeah. Well, my buddy that has the cabin, he's got one of those on his that he strings across the steps of his cabin to keep the bears away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And loud enough boom would do it. I wondered about, like, if I had a cabin up there, having one of those compressed air cannons built like underneath the porch. So anything got up there that I didn't want up there, just hit a button and boom.
Oh, I like
it's
those,
loud, but it's no
mortars.
projectile. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem with the stuff like that, because I was just thinking, one of those air horns would be a good idea. But I think if it gets cold enough, that stuff might freeze. I don't know.
Might.
Yeah.
Where I lived in Illinois on a farm, there was somebody in the area, and I don't know who, had a coyote gun, which was just it was set to go off about every, I don't know, hour and a half, just a gunshot sound. And you could hear it all over the hollow where I lived. And they ran it all winter long to keep the coyotes away from their cattle.
So. Yeah, if you run stock, you've got to be prepared to keep predators away from it. Mrs. Chef Yoda says, "What's the largest Bigfoot that you have found to be reported up there?"
Our height wise, I think about 9 foot is about is the tallest I've heard. I hear every once in a while I'll hear something about like a 12-footer or something like that, but I think a lot of those are over exaggerations. I think once you get into the range of 12 foot and above, I have a hard time believing some of those. I think that probably 9 foot's about average for the males and maybe a little shorter for the females. But that, like I said, that's my opinion.
A buddy of mine went out to, this was when I was working at the hospital. He went out to check on some people. Well, it was an overnight security supervisor. Well, one of the guys went out to check on a report of a dog locked in a car. Well, when he got out there, the people that owned the vehicle were out with the dog, and turned out that one of them was in the car with the dog. But as he was approached, the dog lunged at him, barked at him. Well, he jumped back and hightailed it back in the building. Said, "We got a dangerous dog out there." So I go running out there to go out there with him, and he said that dog's got to be 250 pounds. It's the biggest Rottweiler I've ever seen. And I got out there and it was maybe 80 pounds. So yeah, that adrenaline dumps, you focus on, oh my God, I can see that being a misidentification. With same thing with Bigfoot. You see something step out that's bigger than you. Oh my God, it's 90 feet tall. No, it was maybe 8, but I can see, fear.
Working in law enforcement, when people are reporting assaults and stuff, especially like assault with somebody pulls a gun on them or something, you ask them, well, what did the gun look like? And they all say the same. The first thing, it was big. And it might have been a little snub nose 38. It was big. It was a big gun.
Well, the thing about bullets is no matter how small they are, they still have a big effect. So
Yeah.
Whether it just depends on what you're shooting at, but
Absolutely.
a tiny bullet coming at me is going to look damn big. I don't care what anybody says.
Oh yeah. Well, if you're looking at the down the barrel of a gun, you're focusing on the size of that muzzle. It's going to look 10 feet across to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Louis Norgara brings up a one that was it was a good indicator. It was a story I've heard too. I've read it several places. He says, "What about the story of the bush pilot living up in Alaska? That hunting party dropped a hunting party out in the middle of nowhere, and he said he saw a Bigfoot walking toward them and they found out later that even though they say they found broken weapons and the camp was torn apart. I've heard that story from several places about a bush pilot seeing a Bigfoot going toward camp." And when they went back to check on him, everybody was dead, and there were, rounds scattered everywhere and broken guns.
I haven't heard that particular story, but I have heard one kind of similar about the bush pilot that lived out in the bush, and him and his wife lived in a cabin by themselves. And he noticed his wife was starting to act weird, and she wasn't suited for living out in the bush, and she was starting to get, he thought she was getting cabin fever and kind of just starting to act weird. And she kept talking about her boyfriend coming to see her. And, one day he notices she's like knitting this sweater, and it's like huge. It's like, bigger than, two guys. You can fit two people in this sweater. And he's like, "What are you doing?" And she goes, "I'm knitting a sweater for my boyfriend." And he just thought she was going crazy. And he's like, "Well, I'm going to have to take her into town and get her some help." But he had to go pick up some clients that he had dropped off for hunting. So he goes to take care of his clients. And on his way back, he sees his wife being carried out of the cabin by a huge hairy man. And
Wow.
he loses them under the tree cover, and he lands and he tries to find them. And he never finds them again. So I've heard that
Wow.
story, but
That's
I've never heard
wild.
the one about the hunting camp.
I just had this mental image of a Bigfoot walking around the woods of Alaska with an ugly Christmas sweater on.
Nobody would believe you if you saw him.
Bigfoot was wearing this like lime green and red sweater. Like, dude, what were you smoking when you saw this Bigfoot?
Bigfoot wearing a cardigan.
That is hilarious. Well, there's no accounting for taste, I guess.
Well, is that what you're crocheting, Naoma?
Yeah.
She was crocheting earlier. So,
I'm crocheting
are you making a sweater?
for Bigfoot.
Sweater for Bigfoot.
So if you see Bigfoot in a canary yellow and white sweater, we know what's going on.
That's right.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. I felt sorry for him.
I like the story, but the mental image of Bigfoot wearing an ugly sweater just cracks me up.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not going to get it out of my head anytime soon. That's for darn sure.
Well, we've derailed a few conversations with crazy stories like that, but we'll try to keep it on topic as much as we can since we have a guest tonight.
Yeah.
I know a lot of. Go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Beans.
I'll tell you one of the weirdest Port Chatham stories that I've heard. I just heard this one relatively recently. Was a ship captain that was out fishing, and he saw an Ontonac or Bigfoot. He saw him on the shore, and he wasn't too far away from him. And he's like, "I'm going to shoot him." So he gets I can't remember if it was a 30. It was a hunting rifle. It was a larger caliber rifle. He gets his rifle, and he gets up on the deck of the boat, and he sees the Bigfoot. The Bigfoot sees him, and he shoots him. And he says, "I know I hit it." It hits him in the shoulder, and the Bigfoot reaches up, grabs its shoulder, kind of does one of these where he's like, "Ow, ow, ow," and then he says the Bigfoot reaches into his shoulder, pulls out the bullet, shows it to the captain, throws it down, and turns around and walks into the woods.
Ooh.
Wow.
Yeah,
Ooh.
I don't.
It must not, well, at that distance, it must not have not penetrated very far.
I don't know if I believe that story or not, but it's damn cool.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that is Bigfoot sign language for "fu."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, is that the best you got?
Well, I've kind of remember I was telling you guys I've got my own like theories and stuff, and I kind of
I'd
think
love to hear
that a
some of
lot
your
of
theories.
yeah, I think a lot of these stories we hear about, well, I shot it and it didn't, nothing happened. It just kept walking. I think their muscle structure, you know how Kevlar works, right? It's so
Mhm.
dense that nothing can penetrate it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that Bigfoot, I think that their muscle structure is just so dense that they have a really tough hide. It's really hard for bullets to penetrate it. And that's my theory.
You know, I've said the exact same thing, that they're just very, very dense. I would say their bone density and their muscle density would be much heavier than a human's. And I would say indications that's why, small caliber rounds do no good. It was like a number of years back. There was a bear killed a hiker in Denali, and the park ranger that ended up killing the bear killed it with a 7mm Magnum. But when they opened the bear up, they found the remains of the missing hiker, plus the 38 caliber pistol that he'd shot the bear with, and there were 5 38 caliber slugs lodged in its sternum. So the 38 didn't penetrate. And if a bear is that dense, a Bigfoot's certainly going to be.
We killed one here in town. It was a 500-pound black bear, and it was a really old bear, and its teeth were like all gone, so it was coming into town and getting into like the grease traps and the dumpsters and stuff. So I didn't kill it. Another officer killed it, but he shot it with a 12 gauge Brennicky slug, like a couple of them. And he said it went down and then it got back up and it ran off. And, some of the guys were giving him grief, like, oh, you missed it, cause he was pretty close to it when he shot it. And they were giving him grief saying he missed it because he was like, oh, that slug would have put that bear down. That slug would have put that bear. Well, that bear was terrorizing town for a couple of nights. They finally got him and they finally shot him. Well, they had somebody come and get him. They called the roadkill list and gave it to somebody. And the officer that shot the bear said, hey, I would like to come with you and help you clean it, help you skin it. So they're in the dude's garage and they're cutting the hide off the bear, and they cut him on the officer just wanted to go because he wanted to see if he hit him that first night or not, So they're cutting the bear open, and sure enough, on the left-hand side where he had originally shot the bear, just under the hide was that complete intact Brennicky slug. It penetrated the hide, but not the skin.
Damn. Wow. So if you've lived up there, let's say, for example, let's say we went to an expedition in Alaska, where would be the best place to shoot if the grizzly bear's coming at you? I've never hunted a grizzly.
Well, they say don't shoot them in the head because their head's sloped and the bullets will just bounce right off of them. So if you can, try and get them, in the sternum, stomach, or on the side is ideal. But
if it's standing and it's like got its head back roaring, could you get it into the soft tissue? Would that kill it?
If it was close enough to you, I think at that point you're probably just spraying and praying. You're probably not going to be like taking careful aim. But if it gets to the point where you've got to shoot it, it's pretty much just I'm going to shoot it where I can shoot it. But I've heard don't shoot them directly in the forehead because of the slope of the forehead
and the thickness of the skull.
Bullet. Yeah.
Willie Johnson's an officer down in I believe in Fort Worth, down near Fort Worth, Texas, and he just says I've seen an officer dump 40 rounds of 40 cal into a wild pig. Yeah, those things are hard to put down sometimes.
Yeah.
I want to go down to Texas. I've got a buddy that's been trying to talk me into going down there to do a wild pig hunt because there's no bag limit. They're considered invasive species, and when smoked, they're pretty good.
They actually have a bounty on them down there, don't they?
I don't know if they've got a bounty, but I know, you basically, check in, get your hunting permission and everything from the state of Texas, your hunting license, whatever you need. And then you could just go smoke them.
Wow. That's interesting.
That's a good question. Hellhound says, any reports of Dogman in Alaska?
Not reported to me. I think there was a report of one that was seen in the Palmer Wasilla Valley a few years ago that was making the rounds on like Dogman radio or something, but I've never had any personally reported to me. The natives have a creature they call, I think it's the Tornit. That kind of reminds me a little bit of a Dogman, only it's a little bit more sentient. It's not so much a beast. They describe it more of like a tribe of people with tails. But yeah, I don't have any personal dogman reports that have been reported to me.
If you have any, know where you could find any accounts of dogman in Alaska, I'd love it if you email them to me or text or send them to me by messenger. I'm the Region 2 director for the North American Dogman Project.
Yeah, I'll let you know if I hear any. I haven't had any reported to me and ever. I get Bigfoot reports every now and then, but nothing that reminds me of a dog man.
Sal Passo's talking about the pigs. Says they're good. My uncle would get one every year. Willie Johnson says, yeah, I've been wanting to do a pig hunt. Well, if you're doing, let me know. I might see if we can take a trip down your way and join you. He says there's no limit on pigs. Napier says dead men don't report.
That's what I was looking at. Well, gentlemen,
you calling it a night, Naomi?
Yeah, my pumpkin's going to pop soon. I'm starting to feel it a little early tonight.
All right. Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Hey,
it's
anytime.
Nice to meet you, Beans.
You too, ma'am.
And I will talk to you guys later.
All right. I'll see you on Saturday if I don't talk to you before then.
All right. Good night.
Have a good night.
Right.
Ralston said, my son set off all the alarms at the airport. They wanded him and finally patted him down. He was in thin shorts, muscle shirt, TiVos, 8% body fat, very dense muscle mass, 6 foot, 240, rock solid power lifter. How did he set off the alarms?
Well, I think because I've had it happen to me with like my jeans were bunched up at the bottom of my shoes, and I walk through there, and I think it's just any thing that's dense, like dense matter, like anything that's like if your wallet was in your pocket or something, it would hit on that. And I think his muscles were so dense that it was hitting on his muscles because, like I said, the same thing happened to me. It was just my pant leg that was like bunched up around my boot.
I can see how that would be a problem. Werewolf 5674 says bears lower their head when they charge, hard to target. Well, I definitely want to step off to the side and try to get out of his line of charge if I could. But I was thinking, a lot of bears will stand up on their hind legs before they attack. That's probably the prime time to shoot. Yeah. Richie Evans says, we'll try to kill a hog this year in Florida. Oh, yeah, Brock says dense muscle mass and low fat. Yeah. You were saying earlier you once had a moose walk by your window right outside where you're standing?
Oh, yeah. Oh, dude, I have moose in my yard all the time. I had one on the last day of hunting season. I was telling you guys I didn't get to go hunting this year.
Yeah.
And I had one in my backyard the last day of hunting season, and I am almost certain it was a legal moose because here they have to have their antlers have to be 50 inches wide, or they have to have 3 brow tines that are 3 inch or longer. Well, he only had 2 brow tines, but I'm pretty sure he was 50 inches. And I was sitting on my deck watching him, and I live in the city limits, so I'm not allowed to, hunt inside the city limits. But I was like, man, I should just follow him till he leaves town and shoot him.
just kind of wander along behind him with your gun.
Get your gun propped on your shoulders, kind of nonchalantly whistling.
Hey, no, nothing to see here, folks.
Just tie a carrot to the back of my truck and try and lead him out of town.
Or just put sweet corn in the bed of the truck, and when he follows you to eat it, just park just outside the city limits and wait till he's chowing down. I love your stories out of Port Chatham, and the fact that you've been boots on the ground is so awesome to me. It's one of those places that I've wanted to go forever. And I like hearing the firsthand accounts there. And that FLIR footage, I really wish you had been capturing from the beginning. But even what you got, you can definitely see something moving.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, remember I was mentioning my theory about how bears and Sasquatch don't share the same territory.
Mm-hmm.
So we're there in Port Chatham, and we're walking around, and we come up on these blueberry bushes. And I mean, they're like waist high, far as the eye can see, and they're picked clean, and there's like every so many feet, there's a big pile of bear sign. So there's all these blueberry bushes that are picked clean and bear poop everywhere. So we're like, oh, there's a lot of bears around here. So we keep walking, and we walk into this area where, if you watch the documentary, Mary Beth said she thought she saw something peek around a tree at us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so we start walking in that direction. Well, as soon as we get into that over there where she saw that, the blueberry bushes, all of a sudden they're all full. So there's blueberries all over the place. No bear poop, no bear sign, no bear tracks. And in my mind, it was almost like just like we walked through this invisible wall where all these berries are eaten and there's bear crap everywhere. And then all of a sudden we walk through this invisible wall and none of the berries are eaten and there's no bear sign whatsoever. And that direction where we were going, where we stopped seeing bear sign, that's where it was that direction. That's where we saw the track that I sent you the photograph. Mm-hmm. That's where we had to, in that direction, had the FLIR footage. So in my mind, I was kind of thinking, like, it seemed to me like, well, the bears stay over here and everything else seems to stay over here. So that's just one of the things that I kind of started to think about. Well, then if you read Rain Coast Sasquatch, there's an interesting account in there from a captain on a ship who sees, they're watching the shoreline and they see this bear come, bebopping down the shoreline, and the bear stops, lifts its head up, sniffs the air, turns around, runs back the other direction the way it was coming. Well, then from stage left over here, from the left side of the shore, they see a Bigfoot start walking down the shore, stops, lifts its head up, sniffs, turns around and walks back the other direction, like they were trying to avoid each other. And that's kind of where I started toying with the idea, like, well, I don't think they probably hang out a whole lot, bears and Bigfoot. They probably
not.
Yeah, they probably stick to one side of the bed or the other.
Well, like the two toughest kids on the playground are eventually going to fight.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it happens. I bet it's pretty epic when it happens, but I think they probably do their best to try and avoid it.
I would pay to see that on pay-per-view, Bigfoot versus a grizzly or a Kodiak.
Oh.
Yeah, well, I had a gentleman, this wasn't a Port Chatham story, but this was up in the area where I go and squatch a lot. He was sitting there hunting, and he said he saw this huge brown bear just come running out of the woods like it was running for its life, and it kept looking behind it like something was chasing it, and just like was just out of there, like just running as fast as it could. And he never saw what was after it or what was chasing it. And I mean, it might have been another bear, but he says if it was another bear that was bigger than that bear, it was probably the biggest bear on the peninsula, because the bear he saw running was pretty damn big.
Running from his wife.
Yeah.
I was going to say, if you see a brown bear hauling ass, try to keep up.
Yeah, get out of his way.
Like like the bomb technician guy. If you see him running, you better go too.
That's no joke. See if we got any other questions. None that I'm seeing. I heard an account one time up in Alaska about a guy that was attacked on his boat. Do you know anything about that one? Supposedly attacked by Bigfoot on his boat.
I think what that one's referring to might be the Strangest Story Ever Told by Robert Culp.
Maybe.
And I think that was a gentleman, like his dogs chased it off or something like that. Yeah, that I think occurred in Southeast Alaska. And sometimes that incident gets melded in with Port Chatham.
That's what I heard it in relation to Port Chatham. I thought
there's an article. I can't remember where it's at, but there's an article that's floating around out there, and it talks about like Port Chatham was abandoned because the road was built or something like that. And it talks about, I think, that incident, and that incident occurred in Southeast Alaska, hundreds of miles away from Port Chatham. And there's a couple other like Bigfoot encounters they talk about in the article that happened nowhere near Port Chatham. Not even on the Kenai Peninsula. And it's almost like they were like, oh, this is Alaska Bigfoot story. It must be about Port Chatham. I don't know. It's kind of a weird, it's a weird article. It's not factual. And the fact that they're attributing the abandonment of Port Chatham to the road being finished doesn't make any sense, because there's 3 other villages across the bay that are still there today. So why would they abandon Port Chatham and not the other 3 villages that are over there?
Yeah. There you go. Wolfman says, have you heard any reports of Bigfoot swimming in Alaska?
I haven't had any personally reported to me, but I have heard quite a few through other sources of, they like to swim. They swim in the ocean. They swim in lakes and rivers, and they get in water. They go after fish. I've even heard them. There's an account on Raincoast Sasquatch of one trying to get on a boat.
Wow.
That would be terrifying if you were out there, just throwing your rod out trying to catch some fish, and you see this big hairy arm come up over the edge of your boat.
Well, I'll tell you my Port Chatham story. Remember, I was telling you guys during the earthquake, I was sleeping on the deck.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the first night that we were there, I got a little cot, and I'm like sleeping on the deck of the boat, and I'm just drifting off to sleep on my little sleeping bag on my cot. And all of a sudden I hear this crash. And of course, this is in my mind as I'm laying there like, oh God, I hope nothing like tries to climb on the boat at night. 'Cause there's nothing between me and the outside world, except for like, a few millimeters of a cloth, not cloth, but whatever the cover of the decking was made of. And I'm laying there, and all of a sudden I hear this crash, and this weight like pushes down on me, and I'm like, oh my God, the Nantinnak's got me. It's on the boat. And I'm of course in a mummy bag, so I can't move. And I'm like doing like this. Well, finally I hear Steven like, oh man, I'm sorry. So Steven had come out on deck to smoke a cigarette and tripped over one of the cot legs and fell on top of me.
That would be, as Steve and I referred to, a butt puckering moment.
Yeah.
I would have been cussing in languages I didn't even know.
Yeah, it was hard to go back to sleep after that.
You get a big adrenaline dump like that. Sleep doesn't come easy. Estreston says, would you take your family into the forests of Alaska?
Yes, and I have. Now I
Only
wouldn't
the
take them in. Yeah, I wouldn't take them into like Port Chatham. But we go camping. We're not scared of the woods. There's some places where I probably would not take them, like Port Chatham and some other, places where like, I'm going to go in here and look for Bigfoot. I don't want, to have to worry about the safety of my family. But yeah, I take them into the woods all the time.
Richie Evans says, what's with the deal with Alaska Bush family on TLC? I don't think I've ever watched that.
Is that the Kilchers?
No, it's the what is it? The patriarch of the family just died. Billy something or other is his name. I think there was some controversy that came out about how they weren't actually even living in Alaska. They were natives of Washington State and had lied on some kind of a document in order to get the land grant to live in Alaska, because I guess they have a land grant providing they live there 60% of the time or something. It was I don't remember what the name of the family was. Billy something or other. But it was a lot of controversy.
Yeah, I don't watch any Alaska reality shows. I think just about everybody's got their own show but me at this point, and I just don't pay any attention to them. And it's TV, so the Kilchers are all like, if Otts doesn't make this shot, the family's going to starve this winter. And then I see them at the grocery store, they're shopping with us at the same store. So, right. It's just TV,
Yeah. And they're going to sensationalize it to a certain extent. But we got to all bear in mind that every TV show's number one priority is to get ratings. And so anything that's, any evidence presented on a television show is going to have to be suspect at the very least. It's kind of like that special the History Channel did about mermaids, and they presented it like a real documentary. Then you find out at the end that they just made it up.
Yeah. It's all about ratings. And
It was a good documentary, though. I enjoyed watching it. Louis Noriega says, go to the story of the kayakers kayaking up an Alaskan coast. They found the kayaks broken up and no sign of the kayakers. That could have been bears or anything.
Yeah, I haven't heard that. There was a story in the news yesterday or day before. They just found a guy that had been missing for 4 years. They found his remains on an uninhabited island somewhere in Southeast. And I don't remember if he was hunting or he might have been kayaking, but yeah, I mean, he was gone for 4 years and they finally just found him just the other day. So,
yeah, Mark, you're right. Reality TV is just pretty much
reality TV ain't real. No, well, it's when it comes to Bigfoot shows. Yeah, I tell people, like, if you watch Cops,
mm-hmm.
an episode of Cops is an amalgam of several days, if not weeks, on patrol.
Yeah, you don't go call to call to call to call to call.
Same thing a lot with a lot of the Bigfooting shows. If it was just straight up Bigfooting, yeah. If it was straight up like, real life Bigfooting or real life police work, there'd be a lot of like sitting around like, well, what are we going to do now? Or sitting around the fire and, drinking a beer and smoking a cigar, and nobody really wants to watch that. So they got to.
Yeah, you're seeing key moments. You're not seeing, the moment they punch out from shift briefing to the night driving around and shining spotlights down all alleyways and checking doors and missing persons checks and well-being checks. You just a lot of it's just a lot of police work is pretty boring. Punctuated by moments of pure terror. Hellhound says, what type of Bigfoot is reported to be in Alaska?
Well, as far as I don't really subscribe to the 3 or 4 different types. I mean, I gotta find one type now. Once I find one type, then we'll move on to classifying them. But we get reports here of they're usually between 6 to 9 feet tall. Usually the females are a little shorter. There's the cinnamon colored ones, like the reddish brown ones, black ones, and even white ones. Personally, I think the white ones, that's kind of a sign of age. I feel like the white ones are older ones. I kind of think they go gray, just kind of like we do.
Like a silverback gorilla.
But again, I have nothing to back that up. That's just my opinion. Yeah.
Have you seen that video that's floating around of the trees shaking?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think of that?
That's intriguing because I've had a couple of reports of people that saw Bigfoot shaking trees. It's like an intimidation behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes me wonder. I believe that was taken with a drone.
Yeah,
so
taken from a drone.
It could have been. Yeah, it could have been. The Bigfoot saw the drone in the sky, and I don't know. I don't like that. It's not normal. I'm going to shake this tree to try and make it go away. So yeah, it's intriguing, especially with the reports that I've had that describe similar behavior.
Luis says, I heard that I think he means Bigfoot. Bigfoot up in Alaska are more of a eat meat eaters than a herbivore.
I've certainly heard reports of them, eating moose, caribou, stuff like that. But I think there's probably plenty of vegetation for them to survive on as well. I mean, there's a lot of berries and a lot of sightings around berry picking season. There's a lot of them that are seen in berry patches, and you hear the natives talk about when they go out picking berries. If you hear whistling, don't go towards it. So I think they're omnivores. I do think they probably have a little bit more game to choose from up here than they probably do down in the lower 48. In the lower 48, you pretty much got your hogs and deers, and up here, there's a little bit more of a variety with the moose and the caribou and reindeer and even muskox. I'd like to see that matchup. I'd like to see a Bigfoot try and take down a muskox. But
well,
yeah,
if you've got all these large ungulate herbivores like the moose and the whatnot, it's clearly there's enough vegetable matter to support a big animal.
Yeah.
I've never seen a Bigfoot. I've never been to Alaska. I've been to Colorado, and I've come across a moose cow, and I was amazed at how big they were. There's enough vegetable matter to support herds of, 2,000-pound cows. There's enough for a Bigfoot.
The moose in Alaska are actually the biggest in the world. They're bigger than any of the ones down here in the lower 48. I don't know if it's just, they've got to pack on the pounds because of the cold weather, but they're considerably bigger than their cousins down here.
That's a terrifying thought.
Yeah, you got to be careful with moose too, because they've got that hump on their back, and when they're running away from you, that hump can look like a conical head. And there's been more than one occasion where I've seen that, and I was like, "Oh, this is it," and it's just a moose, and I thought it was a Bigfoot walking away from me.
Patty's questioning the moose cow, the female. A bull moose is a male, and a cow moose is a female.
Right. Sorry, terminology is bad there. I was amazed, because a bull moose is so much larger than the females. The size of the female was amazing to me. Yeah, and of course, I was immediately told that they were the most dangerous thing I would find, and so I'm immediately looking for, its calves. Yeah, if there's calves around, I'm getting the hell out of there.
Yeah, I maintain that bears can be more dangerous than, or I'm sorry, moose can be more dangerous than bears if you're not careful, especially if you get between a cow and her calf. They definitely get protective, and they can stomp you in a heartbeat. They can jump up, knock you down, and if they get on top of you, it's hard to get out from under them.
Yeah. Well, even domestic cattle, the kind of cattle we have on our pastures here in Missouri.
A lot of mass in motion, regardless.
A lot of mass in motion, and if you get between a cow and her calf, you're asking for it. It's a lesson you learn at a very young age on a cattle farm.
Very true. Well, look how many idiots every year get maimed and occasionally even killed trying to pet the buffalo in Yellowstone. Like, when did that get to be a good idea? It's a freaking bison. Leave it alone.
Yeah. Well, if you want a good laugh, there's some website out there where they collect the visitor suggestions for like the national parks. And there's always somebody in there that's like, please train your bears to be out during these hours or something, like there's some lady that wants the bears to do what she wants them to do. It's pretty funny.
We got a call at the sheriff's department one time when I was working the reception desk, and she was mad as hell, and she wanted me to send a deputy out to her house. And I said, what's the problem, ma'am? She says, well, I want you guys to move these signs. I said, what kind of signs? I'm thinking like roadwork signs in her yard or something. She's like, I want you to move these deer crossing signs. They need to cross somewhere else. Like, ma'am, they cross where they want to. We put the signs up to kind of warn you they're in the area. They don't look at the sign and go, oh, okay, we got to cross here.
We have what they call moose jams here. And what it is the tourists will be driving along. They'll see a moose on the side of the road and they'll stop, and they'll be taking pictures and looking at the moose, and it causes traffic to back up. So we're always getting calls like, hey, there's a moose down on Main Street. Can you go tell the people to move so traffic can flow? So we'd have to go run people off from looking at the moose. And it's just one of the unique things, I guess.
Move along.
Yeah, one of the unique things about law enforcement in Alaska, I guess.
I was wondering how many times you got animal calls, bears, moose, that kind of thing. Do you guys have elk up there?
No. We do have deer, but not where I live. Well, they're not supposed to be where I live, but there's been some sightings of them in the Kenai National Wildlife Refuge. But they're pretty small from what I understand. I've never seen any of the deer here, but they're like the Kodiak has deer. And then over at Montague Island, I think around Seward, I think there's deer. And then at my buddy's cabin near Seward, there's deer, but they're not supposed to be there.
Are they whitetail, blacktail, or muleys?
I believe they're the blacktail, the Sitka, Sitka spruce deer, or whatever they're called, blacktail Sitka spruce. But they're
in the Midwest. We mostly have whitetail.
Yeah, well, that's what I grew up hunting in Kentucky was whitetail deer. And they're
when I was a kid down in New Mexico, you could hunt mule deer and antelope.
Yeah, the whitetail, they get quite a bit bigger than the deer here in Alaska.
Good night, Patty.
Good night.
Okay.
Oh, there's a good one. Are there wolves in Alaska?
There are. They are almost as elusive as Bigfoot, it seems like. I've been here, I've been here about 20 years, maybe a little longer, include my time in the military, time in law enforcement, all that good stuff. And I've seen wolves 3, maybe 4 times in 20 years.
I know after the population exploded in the Wyoming and Montana area, they started. A lot of people are consider them nuisances now because they take cattle so much.
Well, I was always I always thought they were like, oh, I love wolves. They're so majestic and they're so, like noble. And I just, think they're so pretty. And I've talked to people that live in the interior where they're a little bit more prevalent. And the people up there are just like, they're varmints. We need to hunt them down and kill them all. They're not big fans.
I can imagine if your living depends on your cattle or hunting, you wouldn't want a pack of wolves in your area because they're going to be the alpha predators in that group. Richie Evans, although I know you answered this earlier, but I think Richie joined us late. He says, "Where in Kentucky are you from?" I used to live in West Liberty, Kentucky, County Morgan.
I am from Muhlenberg County.
Esther Eston says, "How often have wolves killed humans on your watch?" I guess meaning that you know of. I
think there's only been like one fatal wolf attack up here in the time that I've been up here that I can think of that comes to mind. And it wasn't anywhere near me. It was somewhere up in the interior, I believe. And I think, don't quote me on that. I would have to look it up to be sure, but I think there's only been like one recently.
Well, the population's so small up there. I'd say you'd probably, unless you live someplace where they're prevalent, you're probably never even going to see one. Yeah. Louis Noria says, what about cougars and bobcats? Can you see those in Alaska?
So I have come across lynx on several occasions. I've actually been able to get pretty close to them, and I've seen lynx kittens, which are really, really rare. I don't think there's not supposed to be any cougars here, but there is an article. If you like Google like cougars in Alaska, there's an article that pops up from the Anchorage Daily News called like Alaska's Feline Bigfoot. And it talks about cougar sightings in Alaska. And there's been some up here, and it's a pretty good chance that there's some up here, but they're not recognized.
That was like the state of Missouri refused to admit they were here forever. And now they're like, yeah, they're here. What are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
Right.
Grayson County. I've been to Grayson County.
I was going to ask you something. I can't remember what it was. You said you guys stayed on the boat at Port Chatham. You didn't like camp out there.
So what we did was we would go out during the day and look around, explore, and then as soon as it would get dark, we would go back to the boat, spend the night on the boat, and then go back once daylight hit. So we never spent the night on Port Chatham, but we would spend the night on the boat.
You said the second time you went, you actually felt like you shouldn't be there, like you were in danger. What made you feel that way?
So mostly what contributed to that was the weather. And it was kind of weird because, we're there with the TV crew, and every time, so there's like 6 or 7 people in the TV crew plus, us. So every time we want to go and film, it's a big, like everybody's got to get their shit together, and, it's a big production to get everybody ready. And as soon as we pulled into Port Chatham, it started raining and it got windy and the weather got shitty. And we would wait until the weather would kind of break. We'd like, okay, well now, the weather's not too bad. The sun's shining. Let's go. Let's jump ashore real fast. So we would start to get everybody ready to go ashore. And as soon as we would go to step out on the Zodiac to go ashore, boom, the weather would get shitty again, just like rain, wind. And, it happened the first couple of times. We were like, that crazy weather. And by the time we were done, we were like, something doesn't freaking want us here. Like this is a couple of times is coincidence. And then, after it happens every single time, you're like, what is going on? Why is this happening? And the last time that we filmed what we need, I think we had to go collect our trail cameras or something, and we filmed a couple of things. And it was like our last day there, and we were like on the Zodiac going back to the boat, and the wind was just like, if my fat ass hadn't been sitting in the front of the Zodiac, that thing probably would have flown right back, like tipped over. And by the time when we got back on the boat, you know, we're all like hugging each other, like we did it. We were just happy to be alive, because it just seemed like every time that we tried to go between the boat and shore, or the shore and the boat, the weather would just like turn. It would just get really crappy really fast. And we were filming that little that cabin that you popped up in the picture that you popped up there. So that's probably the most, if you not that one, the one that's kind of in the field, that one. So we were filming in that little cabin there, and that, you see that door there, that's where, you know, just inside the door they were filming. They were like interviewing me and Adam and Steven, and it was kind of raining, so the guys that weren't being interviewed, we were huddled back in the back of the cabin. And when it was my turn to be interviewed, Steven said he heard something like growling at him from the woods behind the shack.
I remember that.
Yeah. And he saw like some of the leaves in the trees kind of being, you know, shook or manipulated. Not to the point like that, not like that, but just like ever so gently, like moving, you know?
Yeah. Like the presence of something moving through it, not like it's aggressively shaking it.
Yeah. And then it was my turn to sit back there while they were interviewing somebody else. And when I was sitting back there, I was kind of looking, you know, just lollygagging. And I saw, have you heard the stories about the Glimmer Man?
Yes, I have heard accounts of those.
Yeah. Well, what I saw, it wasn't a Glimmer Man because it wasn't shaped like a person, but it looked like a ball, and it looked like it fell out of a tree, and it hit a couple of limbs on the way down. And I saw the limbs like move. And like I said, it was raining ever so lightly when this happened. So I was kind of thinking like, oh, that's weird. That was like a big collection of rainwater that fell out of that tree. But it didn't really make a lot of sense. And I kind of just wrote it off. And that was before Steven had heard something growling back there and all that, because it was my turn to be interviewed when that happened. So I was just kind of like, oh, well, that's nothing. And then Steven comes back a little bit later and is like, there's something growling back there. And I'm like, oh, maybe I did see something.
You might have.
Yeah.
Mark Napier asks, would you spend the night, DA? Yeah, with the right crew, you bet your ass I'd spend the night down there. I would love to. That would be awesome. Bobfoot says, also the mountain lions, cougar are starting to hunt and gather in packs. Science says that it's impossible and they don't do that. My friend has a video of 5 or more chasing him while he was on a quad. Jeez. That is terrifying.
I wonder if that wasn't like a mother and her cubs or something, though.
Could have been.
Like a family unit.
Yeah. About do mountain lions have multiple? I mean, I know I've heard of like 2 or 3 cubs, but 4 or 5 litter, that would be a lot.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't want to think about it.
Yeah, no kidding. I would not want to be chased by a group of mountain lions. That is not something fun.
I remember when I was reading the stories of the Glimmermen, you know, like I said before, I'm kind of an agnostic. So, you know, some of these things I hear the stories. I'm like, yeah, bullshit. But then while I was having my bachelor week down here, I brought my tablet. I was watching digital movies, and I was watching the Predator film series because I had never seen it. And watching the Predators with the camouflaged, you know, whatever is absolutely terrifying. And now the Glimmermen scare me. I'm like, if they actually exist, I don't want to mess with them.
No, there's a lot of stuff if it actually exists. I don't want to mess with it. But I've got an inquiring mind, and when I hear stuff like this, it kills me. I want to know the truth. I want to dig into it deeper. I want to find it. I don't necessarily want to be the guy that drags in, I don't want to be the guy that drags in proof. I have no desire to be that, because there's a lot of negativity that will come with that. If you bring in a body, there's going to be the crowd that hate you because you killed one, and there's going to be the crowd that doesn't want it ever actually brought to exist. It would be a huge headache. But I do like going out and looking for sign, shooting video, seeing what I can get. But I'm not attempting to prove it to anybody. I like to research and hopefully entertain and inform at the same time. Beans, have you ever had encounters like? Well, I've read a lot about them, about getting logs or rocks thrown at you.
Not not logs. I think we've had some like rocks and stuff thrown at us in Washington. We didn't have anything like that happen to us in Port Chatham, but I remember we were in Washington in this really squatchy area, and we were all in our tents asleep, and it was like 7, 8 in the morning. It was just starting to hit daybreak, and it sounded like something was just hitting all our tents with just a rain of like pebbles. And one of the guys was like, "I think it's time to get up, guys." And we got up, and it was squirrels.
Squirrels were they dropping acorns or throwing pebbles at you?
Yeah, it was weird because it was like they were targeting there was like what 3 or 4 tents there, and they were just hammering acorns at everybody's tent. It was the weirdest thing.
I can tell you from experience, deer hunting in the Missouri woods, when you're out looking for that buck, a 12-ounce squirrel can sound like a 200-pound deer when it wants to stomping through the leaves. They can make a hell of a lot of noise.
Yeah. Well, they're also, I don't know how many times I've been sitting in the woods and I've heard a squirrel, like, I don't know, 50 yards or something away from me start barking.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what the hell is he barking at? Is he barking? Because I mean, I'm sure, squirrels bark at each other and stuff, but it always makes me wonder, like, what's coming this way that he's barking at?
Oh, yeah. What's he alerting on? Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, they can be pretty aggressive. I used to have this gum tree in my front yard when I had my house, and there was a nest up in the tree, and it's, year after year, the squirrels would nest in that nest. And whenever they had a litter of kits or whatever they call baby squirrels, the mother, like, I would step out the front door and she would bark at me and throw gumballs. And I was like, it's my freaking tree. It's, but I would get pelted when I was mowing the lawn because she didn't want me near her tree. And
tell him better watch it. I'm not above pan-fried squirrel for breakfast.
Yeah, squirrel's a good meal.
I've had squirrel many times. It's not bad. My uncle Buddy, who was the basis for the character of White Bear in my books, there was never a time going out to his house. Squirrel wasn't on the menu at some point. The guy always had had a freezer full of squirrels. It seemed like. As Dresden says, tree rats. Yeah, I wouldn't eat a squirrel from town. I would not eat a squirrel that's been eating garbage and whatever it can find dropped on the ground and remnants of food and rotten meat. The only squirrels I would ever eat are from the country where they don't eat garbage and everything.
You like your corn-fed squirrels, huh?
Yeah.
Free range.
Or free range tree rat. Sorry. Oh, that's an interesting question. Werewolf says, could you be charged with murder if you killed a Bigfoot, if it turns out it's closely related to human?
My opinion on that is probably no, because I think that any defense attorney worth his salt would be able to argue that you were in fear for your life because this 8-foot tall hairy thing was coming at you and that you acted in self-defense.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And even if it's coming into your camp, just like in Bigfoot language, just to say howdy, I'm still going to crap my pants and be afraid I'm about to be on the menu.
Yeah. And unless there's video footage of you walking up behind a baby Bigfoot and shooting it in the back of the head, I think you'll probably be okay.
Kind of like gangster style.
Yeah.
Or that guy on No Country from Old Men with the air tank and the bolt gun. That would be a rough way to go.
I would.
That's a good movie, though. Have you seen the movie Primeval?
Yes.
Where the Bigfoot creature have the snout and you actually have bow and arrows and stuff?
Yeah, they look like kind of like baboon creatures almost, but I thought it was cool how they had the wood arm.
Gugway in some of the Bigfoot lore. It supposedly means face eater, but I wondered if they could actually do that, use bows and arrows, and we know they're good at camouflage, but if they could make tools like that, hell, an arrow would be as big around as a freaking dowel rod. The wound alone would bleed you out.
Well, I mean, there's been reports of chimpanzees and orangutans using tools.
Crude spears.
So, I mean, crows can use tools. you'll see them, breaking things with rocks and whatnot. So.
Luis Noria says it was a McDonald's over here in San Clemente, Avenida Pico. It was a riverbed, and the squirrels in the riverbed would come up to the back of the McDonald's, and they would taunt you. They would want your French fries.
Yeah. The squirrels on the MSU campus they'll run right up to you and try to get fries and burgers and whatever you got.
That's hilarious. Getting roughed up by a gang of squirrels.
Seriously, I when I was a freshman, I was coming out of the student union with some Burger King, because they had one in the student union, and I basically got shook down by a couple of squirrels.
Squirrel mafia. One big fat one at the back going, "You give me the fries."
Yeah.
You drop the fries and nobody gets hurt.
Hey, fat boy, you look like you like those fries. I too like fries.
We also collect nuts. Hint, hint. Drop the fries.
Yeah.
Well, fellas, we're coming up on the 3-hour mark, and we have taken up a lot of Bean's time tonight. Man, I appreciate you being here. I think we're going to start wrapping things up for the night. And I really want to thank you, sir, for being here. And I've learned so much about Port Chatham. I love your theories on stuff. In fact, you and I seem to think alike on a lot of things like that. If you ever do end up going back to Port Chatham, I would love to hear about it. And if you've got any more pictures you want to share at some point, we'd love to have you back on. I'll be ordering a copy of your book probably tonight or tomorrow. And I want to get an autographed one for my shelf. But I appreciate you being here, sir. Thank you so much. And I want to thank everybody in the audience that's been here tonight. We are dangerously close to hitting that 1,000 mark. We're at 977, so we're within 23 of the giveaway. So could be as early as next week we'll be giving that book away, folks. And thank you guys for being here. Thank you guys for making it possible. And I want to thank everybody like yourself, Beans. You were military and law enforcement. I want to thank everybody that was in law enforcement and everybody that's put on a uniform, including nursing staff, EMT, corrections, anybody that's put on the uniform to help keep us safe and keep us healthy. And especially considering the way the world is right now, I doubly want to thank them for that, for putting up with all the crap they're going through now. So I appreciate you guys being here, Steve. Thank you for being here. Naoma, glad you were here as long as you could be here. And we're gonna wrap it up for the night, folks. Thank you guys. Hope you guys have a wonderful evening, and we will see you next time on Saturday.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us tonight on DAX Machina. If you ever have an encounter of your own that you wish to discuss, contact us at daroberts@daroberts.net. You can remain completely anonymous if you wish. Pull your covers up tight and keep a nightlight burning bright. Oh, and did you forget to lock your doors?